Chapter 1598. Wang Dongzhu had always had this kind of gentle and slightly humble attitude, and Yang Chun did not hate it. The other party proposed to use it, and this request made Yang Chun startled. "Use it." Yang Chun looked down at the bottle in his hand and suddenly asked with a smile, "Old Wang, it's not impossible to use it, but this thing is a bit heavy. You may not be able to pick it up. Why don't you take a look at it in my hand?" This was a big truth. Now the bottle was no longer the magic weapon of the previous bottle medicine garden. After Yang Chun's adjustment, all the weight was directly reflected, and Yang Chun could temper his body at any time and anywhere. The weight of all the land and medicinal herbs in the medicine garden itself, plus the weight of a sea. Even Yang Chun, who had cultivated the yellow, turbaned strongman body refining technique to the realm of earth-penetrating strength, felt that it was a bit heavy. Ordinary cultivators could not even think about it. Wang Dongzhu and the appraiser beside him smiled at each other after hearing the words, and there was a little disapproving expression on their faces. Yang Chun did not say anything, but stretched out his hand, put the bottle flat in his palm, and slowly stretched it out. The appraiser stepped forward and did not say a specific observation. He just reached out and grabbed the bottle. However, no matter how hard the appraiser tried, the bottle seemed to be rooted in Yang Chun's hand, and it did not move. On the contrary, the appraiser's face was red, but he could not move the bottle. This appraiser of Blessing Gathering Pavilion was not a simple character. His cultivation base had reached the realm of the earth Immortal. At this moment, he tried his best and still could not pick up the small bottle in Yang Chun's hand. How could he endure this? At this time, he had already forgotten the original intention of observing it and began to argue with the weight of the bottle. After a series of unsuccessful efforts, the appraiser directly took a horse stance, mobilized the spiritual power of his whole body to the strongest, grabbed the bottle with all his strength, and began to shake it. Now he did not ask to be able to pick up the bottle directly, he just wanted to be able to pull it. Unfortunately, this simple request had now become an extravagant hope. No matter how hard the appraiser tried, the purified bottle remained standing in Yang Chun's hand. There was no possibility of it tilting. "It's done." Wang Dongzhu finally spoke after looking at it for a while. Maybe it was because he had accumulated his power for a long time, but with just a light snort, the appraiser woke up from his stubbornness. With a flushed face, he apologized to Yang Chun and Wang Dongzhu and obediently stood at the back, not daring to say another word. "Since Mr. has said so, then I shall respectfully accept." Wang Dongzhu's face did not have the slightest bit of embarrassment that his subordinates had after being teased by Yang Chun. His face was full of smiles as usual. It was definitely an extraordinary skill that he had trained in the business world. After Wang Dongzhu finished speaking, he didn't hesitate to come forward. After carefully observing the bottle at a close distance, he reached out his hand. However, Wang Dongzhu was still very sensible at this moment. Once again, he gave Yang Chun an inquiring look until Yang Chun nodded. Then he reached out and touched the bottle. Just from this action, it could be seen that Wang Dongzhu was a cautious person, at least better than the appraiser. Wang Dongzhu looked very carefully, not only with his naked eyes at a close distance, but also with the permission of Yang Chun. He also used his spiritual awareness to explore it several times. Such a clean bottle, just studying it like this took a cup of tea time. She reluctantly retracted her gaze and sat opposite Yang Chun again. "I don't want to hide it from Mister. This bottle is full of vitality. I think it should be a magic weapon to nourish the creatures. It is a pity that Mister only uses it to make wine." After Wang Dongzhu sat down, he did not beat around the bush and directly said his own judgment. It had to be said that this guy's eyesight was still good. In such a short time, he could see the essence of the pure bottle medicine garden. But it was a pity that the pure bottle medicine garden, which had been carefully refined by Yang Chun, was under the control of a Zhu and a Bai. Even if it was a master with a strong cultivation base, without Yang Chun's permission, they could only explore the first layer of the medicine garden. In this layer, it was now all filled with jade dragon wine, and there was nothing else. As for the vitality, this was not something that a Zhu, a Bai, and Yang Chun could control. The medicine garden itself, could simulate various environments and promote the growth of various medicines. In particular, there were countless 10,000 years old spiritual awareness and more than 100,000 years old elixirs, as well as the Punglai divine wood, which could be said to be a divine plant, plus the bodies of a Zhu and a Bai. It was inevitable that some vitality overflowed. Because of this, the appraiser and Wang Dongzhu mistakenly thought that it was the rejuvenation bottle they wanted. Of course, in fact, their guess was not outrageous, except for the fact that there was no way to revive some dead trees. As long as there was a plant that was still alive after entering the medicine garden, there was a 90% chance that it could be revived. As I said, if Mr. is willing, I am willing to buy it at a high price. How about it? Wang Dongzhu saw that Yang Chun did not have an unexpected expression, and he did not intend to turn hostile, so he once again stated his original purpose. I'm just curious, old Wang, where are you going to put it after you buy it? Yang Chun suddenly smiled and immediately asked a question. The current weight of the bottle had been supported by Yang Chen's own body, and then suspended with spiritual power to ensure that his body would not sink. Once Yang Chun let go, the ordinary ground could not bear the weight concentrated on such a small area, and it would fall directly. There was no second choice. This kind of weight was originally used by Yang Chun to temper his own cultivation base. Even if it was put into the Chinquan bag, it would be a disaster. An ordinary Chinquan bag could not bear such weight at all, and it would be crushed on the spot. Now Yang Chun himself did not store it in the merit ring, because he was afraid of accidentally spoiling it. Wang Dongzhu actually did not forget to keep it for his own use. If he did not solve this problem, it would simply be a fantasy. Wang Dongzhu obviously did not realize this problem, but since Yang Chun asked, he did not say anything and directly took out a Chinquan bag. Yang Chun was not pretentious. He was not afraid that Wang Dongzhu would embezzle his own things. He loosened his hand above the mouth of the bag, and the bottle fell into the Chinquan bag. Next, Yang Chen's action made Wang Dongzhu very puzzled. He actually quickly put his hand under the Chinquan bag. Wang Dongzhu did not know what he meant. Wang Dongzhu, who was puzzled, and the appraiser behind him quickly understood Yang Chen's intention. The Chinquan bag in Wang Dongzhu's hand suddenly sank, and it pulled Wang Dongzhu's hand down. Before Wang Dongzhu could barely maintain it, there was a loud bang. The Chinquan bag that Wang Dongzhu thought was of good quality was directly crushed by the huge weight and exploded. The bottle did not seem to be affected by the explosion at all, and it fell straight into Yang Chen's hand that was already stretched below. Chapter 1599. The explosion of the Chinquan bag was unexpected, but the power of the explosion was definitely not small. The Chinquan bag, which had been carefully refined by an Earth Immortal expert, exploded. Even Wang Dongzhu and the appraiser subconsciously summoned their protective magic treasures to block the explosion. With a loud bang, countless items exploded in all directions with the Chinquan bag as the center, making a series of clanking sounds. The protective magic treasures in front of Wang Dongzhu and the appraiser flickered with a large amount of light. Not only that, the entire hall suddenly became dazzling at this moment. Although there are many things that exploded, they were easily blocked when they touched the light emitted from the walls and roof. None of them could leave the hall. The reception hall of the auction house was not a simple building. This kind of place was the easiest for some bad-tempered guests to lose their temper, so it was not surprising to have such protection. Wang Dongzhu, who looked embarrassed, had already taken out another Chinquan bag and quickly began to collect the things that had fallen in the hall. The Chinquan bag just now was not empty. Wang Dongzhu never thought that his Chinquan bag would explode, so he did not take out the things inside. If he did not collect them immediately, the large number of things would definitely fill the entire hall. At that time, the violent explosion did not hurt the hall, but the hall would definitely be filled with countless things. At this time, Wang Dongzhu did not care whether Yang Chun would take a few things or not. It was better to immediately solve the embarrassing matter in front of him. He was indeed the owner of Blessing Gathering Pavilion. The Chinquan bag on him was simply a moving treasure house, filled with all kinds of magic treasures and materials. The things that could be carried by the owner of Blessing Gathering Pavilion were fine items that could be auctioned at any time. With so many good things, even Yang Chun was tempted for a moment. However, no matter how many good things there were just worldly possessions to Yang Chun. Most of the things that Yang Chun owned could not be used up, so there was no need for him to covet the things that others thought were treasures of Blessing Gathering Pavilion, but Yang Chun could only treat them as ordinary items. It was not worth it to offend a big organization like Blessing Gathering Pavilion for such a small thing. Wang Dongzhu finally collected all the things into another Chinquin bag. During this period, Yang Chun did not move at all except reaching out to catch his purified bottle. This made Wang Dongzhu, who had been paying attention to Yang Chun from the beginning to the end, very satisfied. But more than that, he felt a kind of fear. From the moment the Chinquin pouch exploded until Wang Dongzhu finished packing up, Yang Chun had been standing there. He did not use any defensive magic treasure. He simply relied on his body to withstand the power of the explosion. After all, Yang Chun was the closest to the Chinquin pouch, just like Wang Dongzhu. Even Wang Dongzhu, who was at the peak of the earthly immortal realm, had to summon a defensive magic treasure, but Yang Chun remained indifferent. Moreover, he wasn't injured in the slightest. What did this show? Either that, or the clothes that Yang Chun was wearing were powerful defensive magic treasures. That was not surprising. Most of the cultivators in the spirit plane were like that. But everyone understood that clothes were, after all, clothes, not armor. It was very difficult to have a strong defensive ability unless there was some peerless heavenly material and earthly treasure to refine it. Looking at the predicament of Yang Chun, who could not even take out a few kilograms of upper-grade spirit stones, it was really difficult to believe that the clothes on his body were powerful defensive magic treasures. Another possibility was that Yang Chen's body was so strong that he did not care about the explosion of the Chinquin pouch. This possibility was even more frightening than the previous one. After all, the Chinquin pouch that could be carried by Wang Dongzhu with some treasures of Blessing Gathering Pavilion was by no means comparable to an ordinary Chinquin pouch. The power of the explosion was not even worse than the explosion of a 5th-grade magic treasure. No matter which possibility it was, it meant that Yang Chun was a strong person who could not be underestimated. When Wang Dongzhu found that he could not carry the purified bottle at all, and it was impossible to collect it in a short time, the experience of working hard in the business world for a long time immediately made him understand what he should do. "Sir, please forgive me. It was me who overestimated myself and was impolite." Wang Dongzhu bowed and apologized without hesitation. One should not hit a smiling person. This was experience and one of the reasons why Blessing Gathering Pavilion could survive until now under the coveting of various forces. Wang Dongzhu himself was even more proficient in using it. When he saw that the situation was not good, he immediately lowered his posture. Slowly standing up, Yang Chun lightly shook the purified bottle in his hand. With a smile on his face, he said to Wang Dongzhu, "Ignorance is not a crime." "Well said, well said." Hearing that Yang Chun did not have the slightest intention of blaming him, Wang Dongzhu finally breathed a sigh of relief and dared to straighten up at this time. The appraiser over, there was also a person who relied on his eyesight to make a living. At this time, how could he not see the clues? When he thought that he was like a clown who overestimated himself and wanted to challenge Yang Chun to take down the purified bottle in Yang Chen's hand, his face became pale. "Old Wang, you wanted to buy my bottle at high price, but it was not just for this bottle, right?" Yang Chun was a little curious. Spending a lot of effort to find a Dharma treasure with sufficient vitality was not a troublesome matter for people like the owner of Blessing Gathering Pavilion. There was plenty of space in the herb garden. Could it still not satisfy his requirements? "To be honest, sir, I have another request." Wang Dongzhu was very straightforward. Once he realized that he and the appraiser had to face Yang Chun alone, he might not have any chance of winning. He immediately became very straightforward and answered almost every question. "I want to borrow Sir's Dharma treasure to revive this seed." When Wang Dongzhu answered Yang Chun, he did not forget to take out a fist-sized black bead from his Chinquin bag. He held it in his hands and presented it to Yang Chun. Even with Yang Chen's vast experience, after seeing this bead, he could not help but smile bitterly. What was this thing? Yangshan actually did not recognize it. Of course, this was normal. The mortal world, the spiritual world, and the immortal world were so big. Not to mention that Yangshan was a little guy who had lived for only 10,000 years. Even those million-year-old antiques did not dare to say that they knew everything in the world. Even the three pure ones did not dare to boast like this. What is this? If he did not understand, he would ask. Yangshan was not afraid of losing face. The current situation was obviously that Yangshan, as a worldly immortal junior, was asking for advice from a worldly immortal senior. Even if others saw this, they would not think there was any problem. That's my life. Wang Dongzhu seemed to have confirmed that the purified bottle in Yang Chen's hand was the rejuvenation bottle in his heart after careful observation just now. Since he could not buy it or snatch it, then he would change to another way of cooperation. He was a businessman, so he would not reject cooperation. The seed of a divine item left by the ancestors. As long as it can be planted, it can be exchanged for the piece of blessing gathering pavilion for 10,000 years. Facing Yangshan, Wang Dongzhu did not hide his purpose. Chapter 1600. Able to pick up and let go. This was Yangshan's evaluation of Wang Dongzhu. If it weren't for Yangshan casually bluffing Wang Dongzhu with the weight of the purified bottle, maybe the next scene would be different. Extortion was simply a common occurrence in the spiritual realm, and there were countless cases of people getting into trouble because of their wealth. Wang Dongzhu couldn't buy what he wanted, and the owner was just Yangshan, a seemingly ordinary human immortal junior. Even if he used his toes, he knew what would happen next. But now the situation had changed fundamentally, because Wang Dongzhu discovered at that moment that Yangshan was not a person he could afford to provoke. Even if he gathered the masters of blessing gathering pavilion, he might not be able to take down a rejuvenation bottle. And even if he got it, if he couldn't use it, what was the point of grabbing it? In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, Wang Dongzhu made the right choice, cooperation. Even if he had to take out the seed that was related to his life, he would not hesitate. He was gambling that a person who saw countless treasures flying in front of him and could get wealth that other cultivators could not get in a lifetime, but was indifferent would not care about the seed in his hand. Since Yangshan could regard those treasures and magic weapons as dung, then he could also not put the best in his eyes. Now it seemed that his gamble was right. Yangshan did not want to take the things for himself at all. You are handing your life to me? Aren't you afraid that I won't return it to you? Yangshan looked at the black seed in his hand and asked casually. This seed was very strange. He didn't know what species it was, but even if he used his divine sense to explore it, he couldn't detect the slightest vitality inside. It was lifeless. Could this thing be called a seed? Could it grow something? No wonder he needed to find a lot of magic weapons to cultivate it. It was estimated that the general medicine garden would die wherever it was planted, and it would never take root and germinate. Even a high-grade herb garden might not be able to stimulate the growth of this so-called seed. Mr. was indifferent to the sky, full of treasures, just now. I think you won't care about my insignificant property. Wang Dongzhu could still smile at this time, and explained to Yangshan with a smile. I'm a frog in the well, thinking that what I want is the best in the world, but maybe in your eyes, it is just insignificant dust. How do you want to cooperate? The other party had already made it clear to this point, so it was meaningless for Yangshan to ask. Now he was not sure whether he wanted to cooperate with Blessing Gathering Pavilion or not. Everything depended on the sincerity of the other party. If Mr. can help me plant this seed, apart from the part that I need, the rest will belong to you. In addition, knowing that this condition might not be able to impress Yangshan, Wang Dongzhu immediately added, in addition, I am willing to pay 30% of the Jufalu. He was willing to give up 30% of the entire Blessing Gathering building just to plant a seed. It was not an exaggeration for Wang Dongzhu to say that this was his life. However, the more it was like this, the more it proved that it wasn't going to be easy to plant this seed. I can't guarantee that I could definitely plant it. Yangshan carefully examined the seed again and shook his head slightly. How could he guarantee that he could plant it if he did not even know what the seed was? He looked up at Wang Dongzhu and suddenly asked, Old Wang, do you have any specific planting method? No, If you know the planting method, I won't have to worry so much. Hearing Yang Chen's words, Wang Dongzhu only shook his head with a gloomy expression. But soon, Wang Dongzhu returned to his businessman nature and quickly said, "It doesn't matter if you can't grow it. We, the Blessing Gathering building, will compensate for all the resources you have spent and give you a big gift." Seeing that Yang Chen was looking at him suspiciously, he hurriedly explained, "Mister, please don't misunderstand. This seed will not be damaged. I have tried many times before." After pondering for a while, Yang Chen finally nodded. "Okay, then I will try my best." Wang Dongzhu's face suddenly showed joy, but Yang Chen's words were not finished yet. "But old Wang, you still have to help me. What instructions do you have? Just tell me." Since Yang Chen had already promised to help, how could Wang Dongzhu be slow? He hurriedly asked, "Who brought that guqin to the auction? I want to know." Yang Chen was interested in the guqin, so after confirming the cooperation, he immediately asked. Originally, he thought that Yang Chen would ask for an exorbitant price. Now that he heard that it was just for information, Wang Dongzhu immediately breathed a sigh of relief and quickly replied, "That guqin was brought over by 2 people. They were in the VIP room at that time." Next, Wang Dongzhu described the 2 people who brought the zither to him in detail. He even called the appraiser who was in charge of receiving the zither and the shop assistant who led the way over. He told them about the process of receiving the zither before he dropped the matter. In the end, Wang Dongzhu looked like he wanted to say something but stopped. Yang Chen saw it and asked curiously, "Why? Is there anything else that is inconvenient to say?" "Mister." Wang Dongzhu addressed him respectfully again. Yang Chen took over the conversation. "My surname is Yang. Mr. Yang, if you are interested in that guqin, it is better not to consider it for the time being." At this time, Wang Dongzhu looked a little earnest and sincere as he persuaded Yang Chen. What's strange? Yang Chen's heart moved. No one in the VIP room made a move. Presumably, the people of Blessing Gathering Pavilion, at least the higher-ups, already knew about the problem of the guqin. That guqin is indeed a 5th-grade magic weapon. Wang Dongzhu first considered his words. Then he said, "However, it is a little useless. If it is used to attack, the attack power of the sound wave is too small. It is not worth it. As for the tone, it is enough to deal with ordinary playing, but it is a little unbalanced. A real master will not like it. The price is a bit outrageous, and the person who bought it will definitely regret it. If Mr. didn't buy it, it is not a loss." It was more than not a loss. If he really bought it, according to Wang Dongzhu, Yang Chen wouldn't even have a place to cry. However, he immediately remembered that Yang Chen was not as simple as he looked on the surface. The last sentence was a bit superfluous. Fortunately, Yang Chen didn't care about this. He frowned and thought for a while before asking, "I heard that a guqin appeared in the Shantian sex auction some time ago. It was bought by a disciple, and it is very similar to this one. Help me check if there is such a thing." "No problem." Wang Dongzhu had a favor to ask, so he immediately patted his chest and guaranteed. A big business like theirs had relationships with all the major sect. It was very easy to check if there was such a thing. Chapter 1601. Not long after discussing with Wang Dongzhu, Yang Chen left the auction house of the Jufu building. That seed was naturally with Yang Chen, and Wang Dongzhu had no intention of taking it back, nor did he restrict Yang Chen's range of activities. It was as if he was not afraid that Yang Chen would leave with the seed and never come back. Of course, I'm not afraid. Wang Dongzhu was in a good mood when faced with the careful inquiry of the appraiser subordinate. He explained happily, "That seed, and I have a connection like a natal magic weapon, so I know where it is. Once the seed takes root and germinates, I will be the first to know. So what's there to be afraid of?" But this young man is not easy to deal with. The appraiser immediately considered for his master and expressed his concern. "Don't be afraid. 30% of Blessing Pavilion shares is believed to be more attractive than a piece of rattan whose use is unknown. Moreover, I don't want all of it, just a part of it, and the rest will still belong to him. If it were you, would you give up this 30% for a piece of rattan?" Wang Dongzhu looked at the direction where Yang Chen disappeared and asked with a smile. "No." Being in Blessing Pavilion, the The appraiser certainly knew how great a fortune 30% of Blessing Pavilion shares meant, so he shook his head readily. He was more and more impressed by his master's foresight and courage to invest so much. What the appraiser did not know was that his master still had something in his heart that he did not say. If I get that piece of rattan, I will soon be able to advance to the third stage of Heaven Immortal. When that time comes, will I still be afraid of a little human immortal junior? It was not that Blessing Pavilion did not have Heaven Immortal level worshippers, but no matter how strong the worshippers were, how could it be better than their own strength? As long as they had the strength of a Heaven Immortal, Blessing Pavilion would be able to develop even more. Even if they only had 70% of the shares, it would be much stronger than it was now. Moreover, it was unknown whether Yang Chun would be able to get the 30% of the shares. Yang Chun had no idea about the conversation between Wang Dongzhu and his subordinate after he left. Even if he knew, he would not care. Now, Yang Chun had two urgent things. One was to quietly follow the scholar who bought the zither, and the other was to find a suitable place to carefully observe the unknown seed given by Wang Dongzhu. Tracking the scholar was not particularly urgent. Anyway, with the divine sense mark, Yang Chun could follow from a distance and look for the right opportunity. Therefore, when he found a suitable place, Yang Chun immediately stopped and arranged an illusion formation, and then began to explore the black seed with peace of mind. When he was alone, of course, Yang Chun could use it in the most detailed way of exploring. Under the use of his spiritual awareness, a giant seed that was enlarged many times appeared in Yang Chen's sea of consciousness. All the details, from the inside to the outside, were clearly presented in front of Yang Chen's eyes. In Yang Chen's sea of consciousness, there was almost nothing that could escape Yang Chen's detailed exploration. Compared to a super-high-power microscope, everything in the seed was clear in Yang Chen's eyes. The seed, which was originally lifeless, showed a trace of insignificant vitality at a certain point that was not the core. That faintly discernible upgrade was simply too weak. If it weren't for Yang Chen's magnification of millions of times, it would be impossible to find it at all. Ordinary spiritual awareness exploration would never notice that in that corner there would be such a small point that was smaller than a speck of dust that had a little vitality. The next moment, a Zhu and a Bai appeared in front of Yang Chun. Yang Chun briefly told the story and then handed the seed to a Bai. Wang Dongzhu said that this was some kind of rattan. It should be suitable for a Bai to deal with. A Zhu and a Bai looked at this seed, and they were also puzzled. After all, they were just creatures in the mortal world, and they didn't know the plants in the spiritual world at all. Even Yang Chun didn't know about it, let alone them. However, this did not prevent a Bai from planting the seed first according to the instructions of Yang Chun, and then using a lot of spiritual power to stimulate the hidden vitality and slowly improve it. Maybe it could finally take root and germinate. In order to prevent any accidents, this strange seed was planted separately on a small island in the sea of the medicine garden. The space of the medicine garden was very vast. Even if something happened, it would not affect the other medicinal materials. In planting plants, Zhu and Abai were definitely more experienced than Yang Chun. Yang Chun watched the seed being planted, and then Zhu and Abai mobilized the spiritual power in the medicine garden and began to stimulate the vitality of the seed. Less than an hour later, Yang Chun felt the call of a Zhu and Abai. This seed is very strange. Seeing a Zhu and a Bai again, this was the first sentence of the two women. Of course, Yang Chun knew that the seed was strange, and immediately under the leadership of the two women, he carefully observed the status of the seed. The reason why the two women felt strange was that except for the point that Yang Chun had pointed out, the two women provided spiritual power to any other place, and this black seed was indifferent. But as long as the spiritual power was input to the point that Yang Chun said, the spiritual power would be absorbed crazily. In just a short period of an hour, a Zhu and a Bai had consumed 1% of the ordinary spiritual liquid left in the medicine garden space. But the seed had not changed at all. With so much spiritual liquid, even if it was the Penglai divine wood, it was enough to stimulate a plant. According to this consumption calculation, even if all the ordinary spiritual liquid in the medicine garden space was consumed, this seed would not germinate. At least it still looked dead now. There was no sign of vitality, but it was still madly absorbing spiritual power. The two women couldn't figure out the situation and could only let Yang Chun make a decision. Yang Chun didn't say anything. His spiritual awareness immediately explored, and once again enlarged the seed into a sea of consciousness and began to observe it carefully. After a while, Yang Chun took a long breath. It was not that there was no change in this seed, but the change was too small. Originally, there was only a tiny bit of vitality, but now it had become 2 points. However, overall, this change was still too small. A Zhu and a Bai were not enough to feel it. It was good that there was a change. The only problem was that the consumption of spiritual power was too much. It must be known that the remaining spiritual liquid in the medicine garden space was the accumulation of the Taishaman for many years. Even if the spiritual liquid in the mortal world could not be compared with that in the spiritual world, it had shrunk by 100 times. After refining more than 100 spirits and the consumption of a Zhu and a Bai fusing with the dragon gourd, the rest was comparable to an earth immortal spiritual vein. But now that 1% of the spiritual power was used, it could only make the seed change a little. Not to mention anything else, just the consumption of spiritual power could tell that this was definitely not a simple thing. Chapter 1602. A massive amount of spiritual power could stimulate the seed of vitality. Yang Chen knew that he had hit the jackpot again this time. He didn't even have to consider cutting a section and giving it to Wang Dongzhu to get 30% of the shares of Blessing Gathering Building. Just this plan alone could make a lot of money. As for the spiritual power needed to be consumed, it may be a big trouble for others, but for Yang Chun, it was just finding an opportunity to put the bottle on Gong Sunling's nautical map and find a few suitable spiritual veins to extract spiritual power. It was a good thing. When necessary, it was not impossible to use some spiritual solution. The satisfied Yang Chen once again set foot on the road to track the middle-aged scholar from afar. Yang Chun had handed over the stimulation of the seed to a Zhu and a Bai. The two women now had to carefully control the input of spiritual power. At least for a few years, they couldn't easily consume all the spiritual solution. For the growth of the seed, a steady flow was the king's way, wasn't it? At this time, the middle-aged scholar was studying the ancient zither in a place that he felt was safe. He spent a lot of money to get it in the fierce auction house. The joy of the 5th-grade magic weapon made him ignore many abnormal situations, such as the people in the VIP box never bid. When the magic weapon was firmly in his hand, he played with it for a while. After the excitement passed, the middle-aged scholar vaguely remembered the situation of the auction at that time, and his heart sank immediately. Could it be that there was something wrong with this ancient zither? Unable to care about anything else, the middle-aged scholar directly arranged a protective array in a remote mountain kernel. He dug a big hole in the cliff on the mountainside, got into the hole, and carefully studied the ancient zither. The middle-aged scholar was a person who liked the zither. Otherwise, he would not have spent a lot of money to buy this ancient zither. In terms of magic treasure alone, this Guqin was already a 5th-grade magic treasure. There was no doubt about this. The reputation of Blessing Gathering Pavilion was here, and the various refining methods and refining materials clearly proved this point. Whether the zither was good or not, it still needed to be played to know. After playing a few songs, the middle-aged scholar finally understood where the problem was. As an offensive magic treasure, the attack power of this ancient zither was too low. As a musical instrument, the tone of this ancient zither was somewhat unbalanced. No wonder those guys in the VIP boxes at the auction didn't care about it. After discovering this, the middle-aged scholar suddenly felt distressed. He had accumulated so many spirit stones for a long time. He thought that this was a good opportunity to buy an ancient zither that he liked, but he didn't expect it to be such a useless result. He couldn't accept this. No one would feel comfortable in such a situation. However, he had taken the initiative to buy it at a high price during the auction. No one had forced him to buy it, so he couldn't blame anyone. Blame the fortune-gathering pavilion? The auctioneer of Blessing Gathering Pavilion had only said that the zither was a fifth-grade Dharma treasure. In fact, the zither was indeed a fifth-grade Dharma treasure. The auctioneer had not lied to them, so they could not blame Blessing Gathering Pavilion. The middle-aged scholar now had a feeling of suffering in silence. However, he was a cultivator after all. To be able to cultivate to this level, a mere external object could at most make the middle-aged scholar sad for a while. Soon, he adjusted his mentality and began to think about how to deal with this ancient zither. The best way was to take the ancient zither to another auction house that he didn't know about and then sell it. Maybe there would be a fool like him who would buy it at a high price. In this way, he would not lose anything. The territory of the spiritual realm was huge. If he suffered a loss in the territory of Blessing Gathering Pavilion, it was difficult to guarantee that he couldn't earn it back in other places. Before making a move, the middle-aged scholar still wanted to study this ancient zither carefully. Such an ancient zither, no matter what the purpose was, should not make the refiner spend so much energy. After all, it was not so easy to refine a fifth-grade Dharma treasure. It was okay for a professional refiner. Maybe an earthly immortal could refine it, but if it was not a professional refiner, even a fairy immortal might not be able to refine it. Whether it was the material or the refining technique, this ancient zither was so exquisite that it made people speechless. It was not a failed work at all. Judging from the material alone, it was by no means an ordinary work, not to mention the great effort needed in the technique. From this aspect, it was certainly not without a purpose to refine such a fifth-grade ancient zither. Why would the person refine such an ancient zither? From this point of view, it showed that there might be a secret hidden in this ancient zither that did not want others to know. Thinking of this, the middle-aged scholar also began to get excited and re-examined this zither again. When he calmed down and carefully tried to uncover the mystery of the ancient zither from the perspective of discovering the secret, the middle-aged scholar found that no matter how he looked at it, there was no way to find any doubts. There was no doubt about this. Since the people in the VIP box did not make a move on this zither, it meant that they must know something. Maybe they took this zither and studied it. So many people did not find it, so it was normal that the scholar could not find it. Not everyone was proficient in musical instruments, and the middle-aged scholar happened to be one of them. When this ancient zither was played, the timbre was not balanced. What was the reason? The scholar began to analyze from this point of view. Tuning the timbre was a necessary homework for every master who was proficient in musical instruments, and the middle-aged scholar was no exception. But the strange thing was that no matter how he adjusted it, the zither was always a little uncoordinated when played. The scholar adjusted each string very accurately. When played alone, each string sounded normal, but as long as all of them were put together, there was bound to be a sense of disharmony. After adjusting it for a dozen times, the middle-aged scholar finally found that this sense of disharmony was because of a string. When this string was not used, the style of the music sounded very natural. With this string, the flavor changed. Of course, this did not mean that the timbre of this string was bad. On the contrary, it was because the timbre of this string was very good, exceeding the timbre of the other four strings. Although it was only a little lacking, it brought this sense of disharmony. The problem turned out to be on a string. After discovering this, the middle-aged scholar's mood had become very good. As long as it was matched with a suitable string, this ancient zither would be a good zither above the standard. What was even more surprising was that this unsuitable string turned out to be a rare good thing. After recognizing it, the middle-aged scholar could not help but laugh out loud. I see. Ha ha ha. The more the middle-aged scholar thought about it, the more proud he was, and the louder his laughter became. What did you find? Tell me. An abrupt voice suddenly sounded, giving the middle-aged scholar a huge fright. Chapter 16:03. As the voice sounded, two figures, one tall and one short, mysteriously appeared not far away from the middle-aged scholar. These days, the middle-aged scholar had been concentrating on studying the zither, so he didn't know how these two people appeared. If a shopkeeper of Blessing Gathering House was here, he would definitely be able to tell at a glance that these two people were the distinguished guests in a VIP box on the day of the auction. If it was another appraiser, he would definitely be able to recognize these two as the people who brought the zither to the auction at that time. The middle-aged scholar heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the cultivation of these two people who were at the peak of the human immortal realm. Although their sudden appearance in front of him gave him a fright, these two human immortal juniors were not worthy of his fear. It was just that the two little fellas had accidentally broken through his protective array formation and heard what he had just said. However, in the next moment, the middle-aged scholar's relief turned into horror. The two human immortal juniors who were vulnerable in his eyes were so ferocious that it made him tremble with fear. Before he could react further, the two people had already started fighting. The most incredible thing was that he couldn't even survive 2 rounds in front of the two human immortal juniors and became a prisoner in a few breaths. How is this possible? He couldn't understand it no matter how hard he thought. He was a 4th-stage Earth immortal, which was much higher than his two opponents. How could he be the one who couldn't withstand a single blow? You found out the secret of this zither. The tall young man stroked the zither and looked at it thoughtfully for a while. Then he looked down at the prisoner at his feet and asked faintly, "Tell me, what kind of secret is it?" Dream on. How could the middle-aged scholar still not understand that the other party was simply aiming for the secret of the zither? Although he was not as good as the other party, the scholar felt that he still had the strength of character and would never give in to such a sinister villain. He spat out a mouthful of saliva with blood and gritted his teeth. "I admire people who are not afraid of death." The tall young man smiled contemptuously. "Usually, when I meet such people, I will directly satisfy their request and let them die. However, since you know the secret of this zither, I won't let you die immediately. At least, you won't die before you tell me the secret you know. Believe me, you won't die even if you want to." His voice was very low, but the hidden meaning in it scared the middle-aged scholar out of his wits. However, in the hands of the other party, one's life and death were no longer in one's hands. Just as the other party had said, when even death had become an extravagant hope, what else could be left in one's heart besides despair? It didn't take long for the middle-aged scholar to speak. The scholar collapsed faster than he had imagined. Soon, the scholar spilled out what he discovered in detail under the tall young man's cold gaze. The problem lies with this zither string. This zither string is refined from the tendons of the Tanwu Jiao. Compared to the other zither strings, this zither string is much stronger. That's why the zither sound is not balanced. The middle-aged scholar answered every question he had. The short youth had already made him suffer enough. If he cooperated honestly, he might be able to suffer less. Isn't the higher the grade of the material, the better? The tall young man asked in confusion. Isn't that good? The purpose of refining this zither is not to be an offensive treasure, but for the sound. Speaking of this, the middle-aged scholar had absolute authority. However, the perfection of the sound is not about the grade of the individual zither string, but whether all the parts are balanced. This zither string is too high grade, so the overall sound is not balanced. No matter how you tune it, the sound can't be adjusted. I see. With this explanation, the tall young man finally understood why the zither was like this. The problem was actually with the best string. It was really ironic. The material of this zither string was high grade. He had discovered it before. Although he didn't know that it was the tendons of the Tanwu Jiao, he knew that this zither string was excellent. However, he wasn't very proficient in music. He only studied from the perspective of treasures. Naturally, the higher the grade of the material, the better the treasure. He had neglected the problem of balance. If it wasn't for the fact that the middle-aged scholar was extremely proficient in music and had a unique understanding of zither making, he wouldn't have discovered this secret. Then, if it were to be replaced with a relatively ordinary string, would the tone of this zither be perfect? For some reason, the tall youth suddenly asked this question. It's very likely, the scholar replied, but then immediately shook his head. Where can I find a zither string of similar quality and the same refining method? Don't even dream about it. As he said that, the scholar's eyes widened suddenly. In the hands of the tall young man, there suddenly appeared a zither that was exactly the same as the one he bought. The scholar sat on the ground and couldn't believe his eyes. He closed his eyes and then opened them again. Finally, he was sure that it was really another zither that was exactly the same. The one he bought was still not far in front of him. The one in the young man's hand was obviously another one. However, the two zither really looked exactly the same. There was no difference at all. How is this possible? Look at this zither. Does it also have strings? The tall young man handed the zither to the hands of the scholar and let him carefully identify it. The scholar now suddenly realized that this was an opportunity for him. As long as the secret of the zither was not completely solved, he still had a chance to survive. At the moment, he didn't dare to neglect. He quickly checked the zither and then began to play. After playing a few songs, the scholar frowned and began to check the strings one by one. However, what puzzled him was that the strings of the zither were completely normal, but the tone was not right. It was very strange. Fortunately, the scholar was really very proficient in music. When he found that there was a problem with the tone, he almost cut the zither into 8 pieces and checked it bit by bit. Finally, he determined the problem of this zither. There was no problem with the strings, but the problem was the string column. The string column of this zither was very unusual. It was also caused by the imbalance of the excellent material. After careful identification, the scholar gave an answer with a little uncertainty. The string column of this zither was likely to be carved and refined from a certain section of the Lanwu Jiao's bone. Then look at this one. The middle-aged scholar was not completely sure, but the tall young man seemed to have the answer. As soon as he opened his mouth, the scholar was shocked again. In the hands of the young man, there was another zither that was exactly the same. This time, it was the problem of another string. At this point, whether it was the scholar or the tall and short young men, they had determined that the problem of these zither was the same. It was a certain part of the zither that was too advanced, which led to the imbalance of the tone. Chapter 1604. The most surprising thing was that after the scholar's identification, the outstanding accessories, the 2 strings and a set of string pillars, were all made from the body parts of Lanwu Jiao. If this identification is true, it means that there may be the same ancient zither. Together, they can make a complete set of ancient zither made by Lanwu Jiao. The middle-aged scholar looked at the tall young man eagerly, hoping that he could take out another zither. This guy was a music fan and zither addict. In less than half a day, he actually saw 3 identical ancient zither, and it was very likely that he could make a more advanced set of ancient zither. He had already forgotten his situation at the moment, and his heart was itching, waiting for the tall young man to take out something. The tall young man already had a guess in his heart, but he was also looking forward to the discovery of the 3 ancient zither. Seeing the appearance of the middle-aged scholar, he couldn't help but whisper, "No, I only brought these 3 zither with me." After that, he felt that he should not be so polite to a prisoner, and his face instantly returned to its normal coldness. After closing his eyes and thinking for a moment, he quickly put away the 3 ancient zither and then nodded to the short man behind him. The short man did not hesitate to make a move, a sword cut down, and the middle-aged scholar was beheaded. Until the flying sword reached his body, he still didn't believe that the 2 people who were as happy and kind as him would be so cruel. Unfortunately, the tall and short man did not give him a chance to live from the beginning. Now that they already knew that there was a problem with one of the accessories in the ancient zither, as long as the zither was in their hands, they could find the abnormal part without the middle-aged scholar. Since the middle-aged scholar was useless, what was the point of keeping him? Waiting for him to reveal the secret? A flame rose from the middle-aged scholar and engulfed the body of the middle-aged scholar. The magic weapon of the scholar, the Chinquin bag, and so on, had naturally entered the hands of the short young man. The things that could be used with a little modification, and the things that could not be used, as long as they found a suitable time and place to destroy them, everything would be perfect, and there would be no trace of the middle-aged scholar appearing. Yang Chun was almost 100 miles away, tracking the position of the middle-aged scholar from a distance. Suddenly, the spiritual awareness imprint he left after a shock automatically returned to Yang Chun's sea of consciousness. Yang Chun immediately realized that something had happened to the middle-aged scholar. Yang Chun did not want to lose the clues of the ancient zither. This was a great opportunity to consume his own spiritual awareness and get a strong bodyguard. Yang Chun could not allow anyone to destroy it. Without any hesitation, he summoned his flying shuttle and flew toward the location where he had just marked with his divine sense. For Yang Chun, a distance of 100 miles was nothing more than a few moments. He arrived in the blink of an eye. The protective array arranged by the middle-aged scholar was still there. Yang Chun put away the shuttle and began to carefully observe it. Not long after, Yang Chun found out what kind of spirit array it was. He found a direction and slowly walked in. He had barely taken a few steps when a sword light slashed at his head. The two young men, who were tall and short, had not had time to burn the body of the middle-aged scholar completely when Yang Chun had arrived. The speed was too fast, and it was beyond the expectations of the two. What they could do now was to kill all the people they accidentally encountered to cover up their secrets. When they saw that it was a third-grade human immortal junior, the two of them did not care at all. The dignified, middle-aged scholar of Earth immortal level was not their opponent, let alone a junior. The tall man didn't even plan to make a move. Everything was handed over to the short man. He just had to wait to see the result. Brush, the shining sword light flashed and stopped abruptly when it was about to approach Yang Chun. The sharp sword blade was directly grabbed by Yang Chun's left hand and stopped abruptly in the air, no longer able to move forward. Then, Yang Chun's right hand suddenly swung. The immortal beheading saber in Yang Chun's hand flashed a saber light that was more dazzling than the sword light just now. Along the direction of the sword light, the saber slashed across fiercely. The blade of the immortal beheading saber became extremely long in an instant. Any object that blocked the blade of the immortal beheading saber was cut in half. The tall man was more vigilant. When he found that his companion's flying sword did not succeed, he immediately realized that something was wrong. When he saw the flash of the saber light, he squatted down to avoid the saber light without thinking. The blade of the immortal beheading saber crossed not far from his head and disappeared without a trace in an instant. The short man was not as vigilant as the tall man. He had no intention of dodging at all. A little junior actually dared to fight back after taking a casual sword strike from him. Did he really think he was a big shot? This guy who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth was just right to teach him an unforgettable lesson. Of course, whether he could still learn the lesson in the future was another matter. The saber light of the immortal beheading saber just flashed and did not appear again. The short man snorted coldly and turned his head to look at his companion, who looked very embarrassed. He was quite disapproving in his heart. His companion was really making a fuss over a minor issue. It was such an anticlimactic attack. Was it necessary to make that kind of dodging action regardless of his identity? Immediately afterward, the short man saw the horrified look in the eyes of his tall companion. He was suddenly stunned. Could it be that there was another attack? But the kid who entered the array was clearly still 1,000 feet away, and there was no other movement. How could this happen? The puzzled short man suddenly felt a little itchy on the top of his head, as if something was flowing down his scalp. He had not felt this kind of sweaty feeling for at least hundreds of years. However, at this time of the year, how could he sweat? He casually wiped it, and there was a sticky feeling on his hand. It was not sweat. Along with the sticky feeling on his fingers, there was a faint smell of blood. This smell was not unfamiliar to the short man. He had just killed the middle-aged scholar with a sword strike, and the blood on the ground had not been completely cleaned up. But immediately, the short man realized something and understood why his companion had such a horrified expression. The sticky liquid that his fingers touched was blood. It was his own blood. How could it be? He clearly did not notice that he was attacked at all. How could there be blood flowing out? As soon as this thought appeared, there was a sharp pain on the top of his head. The short man just grunted and fell into endless darkness. In the eyes of the tall man, after his companion took a sword strike, a faint line of blood appeared above his eyebrows. More and more blood flowed down from his companion's head. The most terrifying thing was that in this situation, his companion actually turned his head to look at him and reached out to wipe the blood on his head. Chapter 16:05. The result of the spiritual awareness exploration told the tall man that the one who just attacked them was a third-grade human Immortal Jr. This person looked familiar from a distance. It seemed that he had seen him at the auction of the Blessing Gathering building, but at that time, the two of them were in the VIP box, and Yang Chun was in the hall. The reason why the tall man dared to be sure was that Yang Chun kept playing with the purified bottle in his hand. It was the same at the auction house at that time. Cultivators rarely held things in their hands like this. It was either the tempering of spiritual awareness or the tempering of spiritual power. It was rare to play with it. Therefore, the tall man was sure that the Yang Chun in the distance must be the one in the auction house. It was such a junior who he had only seen once and never heard of, who cut off half of his companion's head with a knife. This was still the case when his companion attacked first. How powerful was his short companion? How could the tall man not know? But it was precisely because of this that he had a sincere fear of Yang Chun. Yang Chun was still 100 feet away, but his gaze was like a nail, firmly nailed to the tall man in place, and he did not even dare to move his toes casually. The tall man could read the meaning of Yang Chun's gaze. As long as he dared to move, he would suffer a fatal blow. The tall man did not doubt that Yang Chun could do it. Just killing his short companion with a knife was a warning to himself. Escape? Just looking at the speed of Yang Chun's appearance, the tall man knew that he could not escape far even if he tried his best. Moreover, the chill in Yang Chun's eyes had completely suppressed the tall man, so that he no longer dared to have any thoughts of resistance. Subduing the enemy without fighting, it had always been the method that the tall man liked to play. Not long ago, he used this method when facing the middle-aged scholar. The middle-aged scholar was successfully scared into a pool of soft mud and answered almost every question. However, when others used the same method to deal with him, only then did he know how uncomfortable it was. Yang Chun's figure slowly walked over. Every step he took seemed to step into the heart of the tall man. The sound of every step made the tall man have a sense of collapse that the danger was getting closer and closer. No matter how he wanted to struggle, it was as if he was bound by something. He couldn't even do a little resistance. On the ground, the place where the middle-aged scholar was originally located had become a dark shadow. Yang Chun just glanced at it and turned to the tall man. At the same time, he asked, "Did you kill him?" "Yes." The tall man didn't know why he answered Yang Chun's question, but after answering with a single word, he finally felt a sense of relief. He no longer felt so depressed. Sell the guqin to someone else, and then kill them to get it back. The characteristics of the tall man and the short man matched the characteristics of the people who delivered the guqin to the auction according to the shopkeeper of Blessing Gathering House. In addition, the middle-aged scholar was the buyer of the guqin. Yang Chun almost instantly guessed the identity of the two people. The tall man hurriedly shook his head. He wanted to explain a few words, but he didn't know where to start. His and his companion's behavior seemed to be killing people and robbing them. After knowing the secret of others, they immediately killed them and then took back the guqin. If this wasn't killing people and robbing them, what was? "Where's the guqin?" Yang Chun lowered his head and asked. The tall man didn't dare to neglect. He quickly took out a guqin from his chinquin bag and put it beside Yang Chun. Reaching out to pick up the guqin, Yang Chun observed it carefully for a while and suddenly asked, "How many are there?" Hearing this question, the tall man was almost scared out of his wits. He could confirm that Yang Chun was no longer within 100 miles. Now, he didn't know how he knew his own secret. How could he not be frightened? It was a coincidence that Yang Chun found that there were many guqin. Before, Yang Chun knew that there was a similar guqin in Taishimen. At this auction, Yang Chun's divine awareness also explored the guqin from a distance. He had remembered the characteristics of the guqin clearly. Now the guqin that the tall man took out was obviously not the one that appeared at the auction, which could only mean one problem, that there was more than one guqin. The tall man hesitated, and Yang Chun's voice had already sounded in his ear. "Do you want to take it out yourself? Or wait for me to get the chinquin bag from your body and then take it out?" As soon as the voice sounded, the tall man's fluke immediately disappeared without a trace. He obediently put all 3 guqin in his hands in front of Yang Chun. "How many guqin are there in total?" "Where are they?" Yang Chan was very satisfied to see the tall man being so cooperative and then asked. The tall man didn't understand why he was so obedient. He had always been the one who had the advantage and used this tone to ask others. Today, it was completely the opposite. There seemed to be something about Yang Chun that made him a peak human immortal genius who could easily deal with an earth immortal master, willingly surrender. Of course, the most important thing was still fear. Not far away from him was his comrade's corpse with half of his head missing. The blood flowing on the ground was a constant reminder to the tall man of what would happen if he did not cooperate. When his companion fell, he was completely taken away and didn't even have the courage to take out his weapon. There are a total of 9. 5 are in the hands of the Great Elder, and the other one is in the hands of the mysterious Heaven Sect. The tall man answered quickly. He didn't even know he could speak so fluently. Next, without waiting for Yang Chun to continue asking, the tall man told him everything about the Guqin. The tall man and the short man were both from an ancient family, and the Guqin was passed down from their ancestors. When their ancestors passed down the 9 Guqin, they didn't explain the secret of the Guqin. They only told them that there was another world to the Guqin. The descendants who had this fate would be able to receive the gift from the ancestors. It was said that the Guqin didn't belong to the family, but was obtained from another expert. As for who that expert was, there was no evidence. In recent years, the tall man and the short man had been studying it and even received the support of the family elders. They wanted to crack the secret of the Guqin. For this reason, they didn't hesitate to take out the Guqin and give it to outsiders. They only hoped that someone could solve the secret. The Taishaman's Guqin was released a few decades ago. However, the Taishaman had it for a few decades and hadn't found anything. Instead, the middle-aged scholar only studied it for a few days and found some clues. While the tall man was talking, Yang Chun suddenly asked, "What's your surname?" "Zhao." The tall man subconsciously answered. Then his expression changed greatly. Chapter 1606. After accidentally saying his surname, the tall man immediately realized that he had been seen through by Yang Chun. In a split second, he already knew what he had to do. A beam of snow-white sword light suddenly flashed and directly pierced through a body, causing a large amount of blood to splatter. Even the sword light turned blood-red. To Yang Chen's surprise, the tall man's flying sword did not directly slash at him. Instead, it directly pierced through its owner's body and then flew towards him with a blood-red light. Even Yang Chun became a little cautious when he saw the other party's move. The flying sword, which had drunk its owner's blood essence, had become completely different under the guy's secret technique. Its power had increased by more than 10 times. This method of using one's own blood essence to stimulate the magic weapon was not only used by one sect or sect, but they all had a unified characteristic, which was that it could greatly stimulate the power of the magic weapon. Speaking of which, this was not surprising at all. No one would use this method when they had nothing better to do. If they did use it, it would definitely be at a critical moment of life and death. Although it would cause great damage to the body after using it, it was worth it if it could save one's life. The tall man had already judged that Yang Chun was definitely not an opponent he could fight against at the moment the short man died. That was why he behaved so humbly. Now that he was in a desperate situation, he did not dare to relax at all. The flying sword slashed at Yang Chun, but his body had already shot out and fled in another direction. It was a good plan. He sacrificed a magic weapon and sacrificed his own blood essence in exchange for a chance to escape. If it was anyone else in such a situation, they would definitely make the same decision. However, all the plans required a relatively coordinated opponent to carry out. If the cultivation of both parties were similar, the power of the other party's magic weapon would suddenly increase by 10 times. Naturally, it would be invincible. Unfortunately, this time the tall man encountered Yang Chun. Facing the incoming flying sword, Yang Chun did not dodge at all. The yellow, turbaned strongman body refining technique has given him a strong defense that is almost invincible. Not only that, Yang Chun also stimulated the golden bell. The huge golden bell phantom was outside Yang Chen's body, for dragon shadows flew up and down. The bloody flying sword was surrounded by 4 dragon shadows. Wong, the dull sound of a bell rang out from Yang Chen's body. The tall man, who was fleeing at high speed, suddenly stopped in midair. Then, he felt something tighten around his head. His hair had been grabbed by someone, and his high-speed body was forcibly dragged to the ground. That was not all. A huge force came from the hair bun, and the tall man felt his body become light. He could not help but be thrown into the air. However, his hair bun was grabbed by someone and pulled down fiercely. Bang! The tall man was thrown to the ground in a very inelegant posture. His face fell, and his body slammed into the ground. Puff, a mouthful of blood that had been blocked in his chest for a long time, finally spurted out. But because his face was also smashed into the ground, the old blood dyed the tall man's whole face into a bloody red face. Before the tall man could get up from the ground, a big foot stepped directly on his back. Without much force, the tall man's figure had involuntarily sunk another 2 inches. "You have recognized me, haven't you?" Yang Chen's voice, like the thunder from the 9th heaven, came into the ears of the tall man. The tall man no longer struggled this time. Even his own blood-killing technique could not buy himself a little time. Now that he was bitten by the blood-killing technique and was seriously injured, it was even more impossible to escape from the control of Yang Chen. "My Zhao family and you are irreconcilable." After Yang Chen slightly relaxed the pressure, the tall man was finally able to raise his face above the ground. The blood on his face made his face look indescribably ferocious, and even his words carried a hint of anger. Yang Chen was indeed recognized. At the moment when he used the Immortal chopping saber, the tall man found that Yang Chen's saber was very similar to a saber he had heard of, and the owner of that saber was the culprit who made the Zhao family disappear in the mortal world. It had been hundreds of years since the Zhao family was exterminated. Countless masters who had ascended from the sect had almost spread the news throughout the spiritual world. Even without these people, the propaganda effect of the demon sealing formation and the extermination of the Taishaman was countless times better than that of their full publicity. The demon sealing formation came from the Zhao family. If the Zhao family still did not know that something had happened in the mortal world at this time, then they were not worthy of being a secret family. From the mouths of others, the Zhao family also inquired about the cause of the extermination of the Zhao family in the mortal world. Of course, what everyone heard was the description of Yang Chen's family and the masters of the Taishaman. They also knew that the escape of Black Tortoise caused heaven's punishment, which led to everyone's death. He was a member of the Zhao family. Before ascending, the tall man was also an important figure in the Zhao family. He knew better than anyone the power of the Black Tortoise controlled by his family and the power of the demon sealing formation. It was impossible to break the blockade of the demon sealing formation with the power of the Black Tortoise alone. Yang Chen's role in it was far more than the rumor that he had just won an opportunity for the Black Tortoise. The short man was beheaded. The tall man recognized Yang Chen and immediately made a prompt decision. He would rather behave like a coward and wanted to know Yang Chen's secret. For this reason, he even told the secret of the ancient zither he had just learned. According to the tall man's plan, as long as he behaved well, Yang Chen would believe him. At that time, with a little means, a genius like Yang Chen would naturally fall into the trap unconsciously. Unexpectedly, man proposes, God disposes. When he said that he was from an ancient family, Yang Chen had already paid attention to it secretly. In the tall man's endless narration, Yang Chen seemed to have been gradually guided by the tall man, but the unexpected question still made the tall man say his surname subconsciously. In any case, the tall man would not understand how he had made such a mistake. Of course, Yang Chen would not tell him that when he was plotting against Yang Chen was also plotting against him. The powerful divine awareness suddenly exerted force in an instant, so that the tall man had no way to defend himself. This kind of advanced means of hypnosis required the cooperation of the tall man himself. All the previous actions to please Yang Chen became the way for him to be plotted by Yang Chen unconsciously. He was completely digging his own grave. "You have known me for a long time. Why didn't you go to me?" At this time, the tall man had no possibility of turning the tables. His life was in the hands of Yang Chun. Yang Chun lowered his head and looked at the tall man who was still struggling at his feet and asked in a deep voice. Chapter 16:07. Do you think we don't want you to die? These words were squeezed purely from the tall man's teeth. Yang Chen's big foot pressed on his body like a mountain, making it a little difficult for the tall man to even breathe. Needless to say, it was already good to be able to raise his head and not fall into the blood pit. Once upon a time, this was his favorite method to use in front of the enemy, but now it was used by Yang Chen on him. In fact, Yang Chen didn't have to think much to understand that the Zhao family must still have scruples. They were a secret family when they were in the mortal world, and it was still the same in the spiritual world. The secret of the demon continent, with the ancient books and records in the Zhao family manor, many sect members have vaguely guessed that it was related to the Zhao family. Now the Zhao family was too late to hide. How could they take the initiative to jump out? Now Yang Chun had been in the teeth of the storm because of the prolonging life pill. Without absolute certainty, the Zhao family would not easily take action and expose themselves in front of the cultivators all over the world. Even if they hated Yang Chun, their life and death enemy, they would not act rashly. It had to be said that the Zhao family was really good at forbearance, and they could endure such a situation. The Zhao family had been passed down for many generations, and there were many masters. He believed that if they really wanted to kill Yang Chun at all costs, Yang Chun could only escape. Fortunately, Yang Chun chose to share the Zhao family's ancient books and the demon sealing formation. Otherwise, when he came to the spiritual world, the first thing he would face would be the revenge of the Zhao family. Where is the Zhao family in the spiritual world? Yang Chen asked again. The Zhao family was a great enemy of life and death, and Yang Chun would not always wait for others to find him. Sometimes, Yang Chun didn't mind taking the initiative to bring a few heaven immortal masters to the door at the right time to strangle the danger in the cradle. Don't even think about knowing. The tall man was absolutely loyal to the family. How could he easily tell the enemy where the family was? Lowering his head, he spat out a mouthful of blood and sneered. Just wait for your sect to be annihilated by our Zhao family. After saying that, without waiting for Yang Chun to make a move, he let out a muffled grunt and mobilized his spiritual energy. His cultivation had already been forcefully reduced by several small realms due to the sanguine massacre he had used not long ago. Even if he managed to escape safely, he would need at least a few hundred years to recuperate. He might not be able to advance any further in the future. Now that he was captured by Yang Chun, there was no hope for him to escape. The tall man was afraid that he would not be able to withstand Yang Chen's means and reveal the Zhao family secret, so he might as well end it all. Yang Chun was keenly aware that the tall man was using spirit force. He exerted a little force with his foot, and the tall man was once again stepped into the soil. However, this time, the tall man did not want to resist at all. Instead, he used his spiritual power to detonate himself. This fellow was ruthless to others, but he was also ruthless to himself. After knowing that there was no hope for him, he immediately committed suicide. His decisiveness was shocking. Yang Chun was aware of the tall man's plan at the last moment, but it was too late to stop it. For a peak human immortal master who wanted to die, as long as it was not a master at the golden immortal level, no one could stop him from committing suicide, and Yang Chun couldn't either. Boom! The tall man's body exploded. Yang Chun had already noticed that something was wrong and quickly left, but he was still splashed with flesh and blood. Fortunately, the golden bell appeared in time and blocked the flesh and blood from Yang Chun's body, so he did not become a bloody man. Looking at the mess here, Yang Chun couldn't help but shake his head. He didn't intend to kill anyone from the beginning of this trip. Even the middle-aged scholar. He only intended to quietly control him and observe the ancient zither. After getting the news, he would leave immediately. But the tall and short man were ruthless. Not only did they kill the scholar, but they also wanted to kill Yang Chun. Yang Chun was certainly not a fuel-efficient lamp. As a result, he became like this. Although things went against his wishes, Yang Chun's harvest was far greater than expected. Not to mention anything else, He just wanted to know the secret of the ancient zither, but now he found more. He got 3 ancient zither alone. Not only that, he also knew that the Zhao family had been enduring in the spiritual world and always wanted to get the idea of Yangchun. The ancient zither was not only the key to Yangchen's spiritual awareness problem, but it had also become a clue to investigate the Zhao family. After hurriedly cleaning up the mess here, Yangchun left with his spoils of war. Some things were not suitable to be observed on the spot. Yangchun knew the way. There were still 6 ancient zither outside, but Yangchun was not in a hurry to find the other ones to make a set immediately. It seemed that his friend in the immortal world said that he got the clue from an ancient zither. He just needed to see if the 3 zither in his hands had the secret. It was just a few 5th-grade ancient zither, so what if they were made into a set? It was not worth Yangchen's interest. In another safe place tens of thousands of miles away from this place, Yangchun took out 3 ancient zither and began to explore them carefully in turn. An ancient zither that was enlarged tens of thousands of times appeared in Yangchen's sea of consciousness. At a glance, Yangchen found the problem with the zither string. The tendons of the Kanwu Jiao were refined into a unique zither string. Was this the secret? Yangchen shook his head directly in his heart. It was such a simple thing. Using a 5th-grade magic weapon to cover, it was a bit clumsy. Moreover, the secret that Yangchun wanted was not a magic weapon, but a map. After carefully checking it inch by inch, Yangchun finally found something unusual again. Like the Kanwu Jiao string, another zither string seemed to have a little problem. This zither string was very carefully wrapped. Even if he used his spiritual awareness to explore it countless times, he would only think that it was an ordinary zither string that was not much different from the other ones. However, in Yangchen's sea of consciousness, this zither string finally showed a trace of abnormality. At first, even Yangchun thought that it was just an ordinary zither string, but in the process of Yangchen's careful observation, Yangchun actually found that the white dragon in his sea of consciousness was slowly floating towards this zither string without any command from him. Only then did he realize that there was something wrong with this zither string. Under the almost all-pervasive exploration of the spiritual awareness, after being magnified tens of thousands of times, Yangchun finally found that this zither string turned out to be an ordinary zither string that was 99% wrapped outside. The innermost strand was the hidden secret. This was an extremely thin thread, and it was wrapped in a thick layer. It had been meticulously refined, and there was not the slightest bit of abnormal aura. It was not until Yangchun carefully opened the things wrapped outside that he found that the extremely thin strand inside was also a zither string. It was just that the material of this zither string was a little exaggerated. The thing that made this zither string was something from the dragon's body. If Yangchun was not wrong, it should be a dragon's beard. Chapter 1608. The moment he found the dragon whisker string, Yangchen's heart was suddenly enlightened. That's right. Only this level of things was worth covering with a 5th-grade magic treasure ancient zither, even using the zither string of Lanwu Jiao to cover it. Since the dragon clan left the mortal world collectively, they rarely appeared in the spiritual world. It has been hundreds of thousands of years now. There were only a few people who could use the dragon's objects to refine magic treasures. Only Yangchun, who got the news from the EC Dragon King, could have a few magic treasures of the Dragon Clan. Now there was another one, but he didn't know what master refined it. No wonder the white dragon condensed by the dragon Shi in the sea of consciousness would automatically float to the zither string. They were of the same origin, so they would naturally attract each other. This was also good. In the future, if he encountered any dragon's objects, he would be able to distinguish them by the dragon Shi. For a while, Yangchun forgot to look for clues in the ancient zither. Since he encountered the dragon whisker string, he had to take it for himself anyway. If he didn't take it, he would be blamed. This kind of thing that fell into his hands automatically. No matter what, Yangchun would not take the initiative to push it away. The refiner was very careful. The dragon whisker strings were covered up flawlessly, but the refinement was very ingenious. The outer cover and the dragon whisker strings were not fused into one, but could be easily separated after opening a certain position. After magnifying the sea of consciousness, Yangchen easily found the position of separation and took out the thin dragon whisker string alone. The remaining part of the cover was still a complete zither string. Even if it was played, people could not hear any difference from before. It was really a refining master. The thin dragon whisker string was held in his hand. It was as light as nothing, but Yang Chun could feel a faint long way from it. This long way was so weak that it was almost imperceptible. If it wasn't for the dragon chi in Yang Chen's body, he might not be able to detect it at all. However, as long as the dragon's whisker zither was stretched taut and lightly plucked, it would naturally carry an indescribable aura. If any expert were to play the zither with such strings, they would definitely be able to gain the upper hand in terms of momentum. Yangchen wasn't an expert in music, so he didn't dare to say whether the strings were good or bad, but he could comment on the crafting method. If the current 9 grades were used to evaluate magic treasures, then this zither string could be classified into the upper 8th or 9th grade category. This was only a single string. If the entire body was made of this kind of string, and even the body of the zither was refined from the body of the dragon clan, who knew what kind of magic treasure it would be that would drive people crazy. He found a string, but Yang Chun had 3 ancient zither on him. If it was anyone else, they would first check all the other 2 ancient zither. Yang Chun was no exception. He first put away the one that he had finished examining, then took out the second one and began to examine it carefully. One side of the string pillar was refined from the bones of the Kanwujiao. This should be the same concealment method as the previous zither. After a rough examination, Yang Chun still let the dragon chi automatically determine whether there were dragon items on the zither. Unsurprisingly, the other side of the string pillar also attracted the dragon chi. However, when Yang Chun examined it in detail, he found that it was not a complete side of the string pillar. Only half of the string pillar was related to the dragon clan, and it was nested in the ordinary materials wrapped around it. This half of the string pillar was refined from the bones of a dragon. As for the specific location of the dragon bone, Yangchen couldn't tell for the time being. Similarly, this half of the string pillar was very easy to separate. Since he already had the zither strings, Yang Chun didn't waste much time and put this half of the string pillar into his pocket. The third zither was also a dragon whisker string, but the thickness was different. It should be a string with a different tone from the first one. On the 3 zither, Yang Chun found 3 things. The tall man said that there were a total of 9 zither like this. After collecting all 9 zither, Yang Chun would have a whole set of zither made from dragon items. Originally, Yang Chun didn't care much about the zither itself. He didn't even have the intention to collect the other 6 zither. However, after discovering the dragon whisker string and the dragon bone string pillar, even Yang Chun couldn't help but think that he should spend some time to collect the other zither. In a few decades, this zither would completely become the background of the major auctions. Maybe the Zhao family couldn't find out the secret of the zither, so they came up with the method of the tall and the short. They released the zither and carefully monitored it to see who could discover the secret of the zither. In this way, Yang Chun still had a great chance to collect all the other 6 zither. Compared with solving the big problem of the spiritual awareness, for the time being, collecting the zither was not an urgent matter. He could wait for the wind to blow over and then slowly think of a way. At present, what Yang Chun needed most was to solve the problem of the spiritual awareness as soon as possible. The solution, at present, was hidden in this zither. Yang Chun learned from his friend in the Immortal world that as long as he used a complete set of the right method, the map hidden in the zither would appear, and he would be able to find the place where the master was imprisoned, spend his own spiritual awareness to open the seal, and get the gratitude of the imprisoned heaven immortal master. However, no one would have thought that the entire set of techniques was to completely and accurately play a relatively popular song twice. Moreover, what made people speechless was that when playing the zither for the first time, the zither song had to be played backwards and played completely. Generally speaking, it was very natural to play a song twice normally. Many zither masters practiced more than 10 times when practicing, but no one would play the zither completely in reverse order. Therefore, the key to unlocking the secret had not been discovered until now. Even Yang Chen's friend, because of a bet with a certain guy, he was extremely familiar with a certain song. Not only could he recite it backwards, but he could even play it backwards. In this case, he used a zither to play a song and discovered the secret of a zither. Since he already knew the key to unlocking the map, Yang Chen, of course, began to prepare a few years ago. Yang Chen had learned all the tunes of the song. Although he did not play it well, the key to unlocking the map was to play each note in the correct order, that is, to correctly pluck each string. There was not much requirement for the level of performance. With Yang Chen's level, it was enough to deal with it. In the case where Yang Chen was not proficient, but every note was correct, Yang Chen finally completed a complete performance twice. Chapter 1609. When Yang Chen played the last note accurately, the zither in his hand suddenly emitted a dazzling brilliance. Then, a remnant of spiritual sense rushed into Yang Chen's sea of consciousness, and a complete map appeared in his sea of consciousness. Without saying anything, a large number of spiritual sense threads in Yang Chen's sea of consciousness squirmed rapidly, and in a short while, the map outlined by the remnant of spiritual sense was completely copied. After a while, the divine sense slowly dissipated, leaving no trace behind. A random zither happened to be the one with the map in it. Yang Chen didn't feel that he had such good luck, so he immediately took out the second zither and continued to play. Fortunately, this zither also preserved a map. Unfortunately, this map was completely different from the previous one. Two zither, two maps, could it be true and false? Or was there another possibility? Yang Chen didn't have time to judge whether it was true or false. He first took out the third zither and played the same. Unfortunately, Yang Chen's guess in his heart became a fact. The third zither contained a third map, which was completely different from the previous two. There were two possibilities. The map could be real and false. In his previous life, Yang Chen's friend from the Immortal world was lucky enough to find the right place with only one zither. Another possibility was that all the maps were real, and the 9 maps in the 9 zither had 9 heaven immortal experts sealed in them. If this was the case, it had to be said that the ancestors of the Zhao family were really generous. 9 heaven immortal experts were casually sealed by them. If it was an ordinary sect, this was simply a force that could directly destroy the whole sect. No wonder he had never heard of the Zhao family in his previous life. They could endure and were generous. It would be strange if ordinary people could find these two things. There was only one way to know whether it was true or false. That was to personally go to the place on the map and see if he could really rescue a Heaven Immortal expert, or even 3. The 3 locations marked out on the 3 maps could be said to be completely different from each other. There was at least a distance of hundreds of thousands of li between them, 3 different directions. If each of those locations had a heavenly immortal sealed away, Yang Chen could not figure out why. In any case, with the map in hand, Yang Chen had achieved his goal. Before leaving, Yang Chen had to go back to Chunyang Palace, at least to greet the head of the palace, so as not to have no news and cause their misunderstanding. Each of the 3 zither had a unique divine sense imprint on them, which allowed them to be tracked at any time. Most people would never be able to discover this unique spiritual sense imprint, and would only think that it was the spiritual power fluctuations of the zither. But in front of Yang Chen, especially in his knowledge sea, which had been magnified tens of thousands of times, these divine sense imprints were as bright as a bonfire burning in the dark night. To solve this, Yang Chen was very experienced. In order to avoid the tracking of Li Heng's spiritual sense, Yang Chen wrapped the spiritual sense imprint with his own spiritual sense threads. The unique spiritual sense threads cultivated by the 3 purities secret art had been tempered by the spiritual sense of the great principal golden immortal. It was unreasonably strong, and it was more than enough to shield a few spiritual sense imprints. Not only was it shielded, but it was not difficult to erase it directly. However, for the other 6 zither and the Zhao family, Yang Chen decided to leave these spiritual sense imprints. Maybe one day he could lure the Zhao family out. After dealing with the zither, Yang Chun returned directly to the sect. This trip had been a few years, and the sect must have had more changes. For the time being, a few years was not enough for the forces of the spiritual world, especially for a force like Chunyang Palace, which started from scratch, to achieve qualitative change. However, the sect's framework had been completely set up, and many natives of the spiritual world had been accepted as the sect's preparatory disciples. Of course, they were known as slaves. To be honest, there was really nothing worth coveting by other sect people here in Linyang River, and even the row cultivators were too lazy to come and fight for it. At best, there were a few human immortal-level spiritual veins, and Chunyang Palace only occupied one. To put it bluntly, even if someone blatantly occupied other places, Chunyang Palace did not have enough manpower to snatch it back. Based on this situation, Chunyang Palace had almost no disputes in its own territory. The contact with other sect was just that a few cultivators had come, both in the sect and rogue cultivators. Their purpose was nothing more than to ask Yang Chun for the prolonging life pill. The prolonging life pill was Yang Chun's personal item, and the sect had no right to dispose of it. Therefore, these people did not achieve their purpose. However, people who knew Yang Chun knew that Yang Chun attached great importance to the sect, so they were very polite to the elders, such as the head of the palace. They all understood that it was impossible to get the prolonging life pill directly from Chunyang Palace, but at least they could make friends, and they could also give Yang Chun a little favor from his side. Things that could save lives at a critical moment were still worth everyone's effort. After a simple greeting with the head of the palace, Yang Chun came to the sea again and returned to his home. Gao Yu, Gong Sunling, and Tao Junkie were both there. When they saw their husband coming back, they were naturally very happy. After the couple reunited for a few days, Yang Chun took the three women to patrol around the Lihan Sea. Lan Ning was now a neighbor of Yang Chen's family, and she was unwilling to be lonely and wandered around the sea. The purpose of patrolling the Lihan Sea was to make Gong Sunling's mountain river geographical map more perfect, and the other purpose was to explore the spiritual veins of the Lihan Sea. The mysterious seed left by Master Wang of Jufu Lu required a lot of spiritual power to be stimulated. Yang Chun must find a continuous supply of spiritual power in order to be able to let a Zhu and a Bai fully stimulated. In fact, during this period of time, Gong Sunling had been staying in the Dragon Palace on the Lihan Sea. The sea map would automatically fill in some of the exposed spiritual veins. As Gong Sunling already knew, there were still no less than 4 spiritual veins of the fairy immortal level, but they were far away from the coast, and Lan Ning had also seen it from a distance. There were super powerful sea beasts there. If Yang Chun wanted to use spiritual power, he could use Gong Sunling's sea map directly. However, Yang Chun still felt that it should be safe. Once the spiritual power of the fairy immortal level spiritual veins was extracted too much, it was estimated that it would attract the attention of those super powerful sea beasts. The current Chunyang Palace could not afford any movement. It was best to find more spiritual veins to share, and there would not be too much fluctuation. According to the location in his memory, Yang Chun took his family and Lan Ning in the shuttle and turned back and forth several times in the Lihan Sea at high speed, even when passing through the nests of those super powerful sea beasts. Fortunately, the speed was fast enough, and they did not stop for long. Those sea beasts saw that they were just passing by and did not pursue them. On Gong Sunling's sea map, there were hundreds of spiritual veins on this trip. Chapter 16:10. On the original map of the East China Sea and the South China Sea, it was now full of bright and dark spots. Each bright spot indicated that this was a large or small spiritual vein. Yang Chen's pure bottle medicine garden was simply re-refined by Yang Chun. The weight was controlled within a certain range, and then it was placed on Gong Sunling's map. The spiritual power of hundreds of spiritual veins was absorbed proportionally according to the level of the spiritual veins. So many spiritual veins were enough to support the mysterious seed of Wang Dongzhu of the Blessing Gathering Pavilion to germinate. That is, if Gong Sunling refined the sea map, there would be such a possibility. Otherwise, No sect could come up with hundreds of spiritual veins at the same time for a seed to germinate. Even if the profound heaven sect was the first in terms of comprehensive strength, it would not necessarily be able to come up with it. Aju and Abai were responsible for taking care of the mysterious seed carefully. In addition to taking care of the other medicinal materials in the medicine garden, they had another important job at the same time. Once they found that there was something wrong with the mysterious seed, they would destroy it immediately, even if it had already germinated and grown. Aju and Abai were the spirit of the medicine garden. As long as something grew in the medicine garden, it could not escape the control of the two women. Ling, Junkie, you have been in the spiritual world for so long. Do you feel any difference between cultivating in the spiritual world and in the mortal world? When everything settled down, Yang Chun asked his 3 wives and concubines very seriously in the Dragon Palace. It seems that just relying on the cultivation method of the mortal world to the extreme, the spiritual power alone is not enough to improve the realm. Tao Junkie had ascended for the longest time and had the most insights on this. In hundreds of years, she only improved a few small realms, which was far from comparable with the cultivation speed of the geniuses in the mortal world, and you must change to the cultivation method of the spiritual world. Otherwise, the cultivation method of the mortal world will not be able to support the absorption of 100 times the spiritual pressure in the spiritual world. Tao Junkie was born in Taishaman. When she arrived in the spiritual world, there was a profound heaven sect to guide her, and she could immediately come into contact with the cultivation method of the spiritual world, so there was no shortage in this aspect. However, Gao Yu, Gong Sunling, and other people in Chunyang Palace did not have this convenience. They still knew those martial arts in the mortal world, which was much less efficient. Yang Chun and Gao Yu Gong Sunling cultivated the origin cultivation method and also faced the same problem. Up until now, Yang Chun had not found the advanced version of the origin cultivation method. This was Yang Chen's mistake. Cultivating the source cultivation technique in a mortal world had a huge advantage, but in the spirit realm, although he could still maintain his daily cultivation, without an advanced version, his future cultivation would fall further and further behind. The state of mind in the mortal world is completely different in the spirit realm, Gao Yu said slowly. For the time being, she had not felt the problem of the cultivation method, but she could already feel some differences in the improvement of her state of mind. Gong Sunling didn't speak, but nodded silently, completely agreeing with Gao Yu's words. When you reach the spirit realm, if you ascend normally, your state of mind is basically enough. Yang Chen was very satisfied with Gao Yu and Gong Sunling's perception. He nodded slightly and said, in addition to spiritual power, the biggest obstacle to the improvement of the spirit realm is the mastery of the laws of the power of the spirit realm. This was not only said to Gao Yu and Gong Sunling, but also to Tao Junkie. Because Tao Junkie did not have a lack of cultivation method, it was basically smooth sailing. On the contrary, Gao Yu and Gong Sunling did not feel it as deeply. Sometimes things were like this. Not everything went smoothly was perfect. A little setback could allow one to understand more things. One sentence made the 3 women fall into contemplation. No one spoke, thinking about the content of Yang Chen's words. Yang Chen's words actually mentioned a basic requirement. That was the state of mind. Normal ascending masters have already experienced enough honing, so there is no need for more hardships on this. Only those who simply rely on strong strength to survive the tribulation and their state of mind has not reached great success will have such a deficiency. At this point, Mu Mingyuan, who ascended directly in the past, was in trouble, and Yang Lan and Yang Lan were also in trouble. Speaking of Mu Mingyuan, when Yang Chan returned to Chunyang Palace this time, he also saw Mu Mingyuan's figure. He ascended earlier than everyone in Chunyang Palace. After ascending, it took him hundreds of years to heal in the reception town. After leaving the reception town, one step ahead of the master of the palace, Mu Mingyuan knew that his cultivation was poor, but he was not discouraged. He directly found an ordinary corner of the natives and changed his name into his original form. He observed the lives of those natives when he had nothing to do, but it also made him make up for a lot of the shortcomings in the mortal world. When he heard that Chunyang Palace had been established in the spiritual world, Mu Mingyuan decisively rushed to Chunyang Palace and was now a disciple of Chunyang Palace's Hall of Eccentrics. Over the years, Mu Mingyuan had a lot of insights, which was enough to make up for the shortcomings in his state of mind and become a real human immortal master. For the time being, he ascended the earliest, but his cultivation was the lowest, at most the second grade of human immortal. However, in the future, as long as he cultivated diligently, with his qualifications, it was not impossible to ascend to the immortal world. Mu Mingyuan's affairs could not be considered by everyone for the time being, but the problem that Yang Chun said was something that everyone had to consider carefully. The mastery of the rules of power was no longer a simple control of the human heart. It was completely different from the realm in the mortal world. The so-called state of mind had almost been trained in the human world. Those who had not been enlightened could not have any chance to be enlightened unless there was a master who was willing to live incognito among the natives. It was not Mu Mingyuan who had no way. Which one of the dignified human immortals, earth immortals, or even fairy immortals was willing to do so? What Yang Chun said was also a solution for Chunyang Palace in a short period of time. There was no higher cultivation method that could greatly improve their cultivation. Of course, it was not an expedient measure. The understanding of the rules was extremely useful at any time, even if one became an earth immortal or a fairy immortal. In addition to settling down the sect, this was also one of Yang Chen's purposes for coming back. The clues obtained from the ancient zither would take at least a few decades of Yang Chen's time. Yang Chun had to point out the direction of cultivation for his own people. Finally, Yang Chun told the girls his plan. Hearing that Yang Chun was going to solve his own divine sense problem, none of the girls disagreed. It was just that they were going to be separated for decades, and the girls were a little reluctant, but no one stopped him and no one insisted on following him. They knew what Yang Chun was thinking. He did not want them to follow him and be afraid. After saying goodbye to the girls, Yang Chun once again embarked on his journey. This time, Yang Chun intended to go to all the places shown on the 3 maps. Chapter 16:11. Among the people who ascended at about the same time as Yang Chun, no one was more familiar with the geography of the spiritual realm than Yang Chun. Even those who had ascended for thousands of years or even longer might not be able to compare with Yang Chun. Yang Chun knew all 3 places marked on the map. However, they were not in prosperous places. Instead, they were all distributed in barren hills and unruly rivers. 2 of them were even in extremely dangerous places. Even Yang Chun in his previous life would not necessarily choose those 2 places when he was desperately trying to avoid being hunted. The last place was relatively peaceful and not as dangerous as the first 2 places. As a result, this place was not rarely visited by people. Many rogue cultivators gathered in this area, which increased the chances of Yang Chun exposing himself if he wanted to sneak around. Of course, Yang Chun's first stop was a slightly simpler place. Even if there were a lot of cultivators, Yang Chun believed that as long as he was careful enough, he could still solve it without alarming anyone. Anyway, his main purpose was to be able to consume his spiritual awareness. Getting a celestial immortal guard was a side benefit. It was not a direct goal. Coincidentally, this area was also one of the many places that Yang Chun had proposed when he was seeking a place to stay in Chunyang Palace not long ago. The entire area belonged to Yinluo Mountain. After Yang Chun proposed to Yinluo Mountain, many sects sent a lot of experts to plow the entire boundary of Yinluo Mountain. No matter what kind of discovery was made, they would not let it go. As long as it was related to cultivation, all of them were carefully searched. After such a thorough search, those people also found a few earth immortal and heaven immortal spirit veins. No sect would complain about having too many heaven immortal spirit veins in their sect. The original owner of the area happily accepted these heaven immortal spirit veins. As for the newly discovered earth immortal spirit veins, they generously let some rogue cultivators occupy them. In just a few years, these places became very lively gathering areas for cultivators. Many rogue cultivators would choose to make a comeback and seek a place to cultivate here at a certain price. There was a unique mark on the map, which should be the location where the antenna expert was imprisoned and sealed. The specific location was not very close to the spirit veins. On the contrary, it was at the edge of several spirit veins. This was also the reason why Yang Chen was confident that he would not alarm any people. Yang Chen knew in his previous life that there were several famous heaven immortal spirit veins in Yanluo Mountain. At the same time, it was also a very famous gathering place. However, it was a pity that Yang Chen did not come here in person in his previous life. Therefore, even if there was a map, Yang Chen needed to ask a few questions to determine the direction. There were really a lot of cultivators here. In less than half a day, Yang Chen met 3 or 4 of them. After Yang Chen asked for the way, he would seriously point out the direction to him. All of them were pointing in the same direction. Not a single one of them was wrong. Sometimes, Yang Chen would be surprised. Was he so lucky that he met good people? After a few more days of travel, he would be able to reach his destination. Yang Chen didn't care too much about it. He went all the way to his destination. He didn't notice the surprise in the eyes of the few cultivators after they saw him off. The last person who had given him directions had actually shown a trace of surprise, but Yang Chen did not care. If it were Yang Chen, he would also be surprised that he did not go to the place where the spirit veins gathered, but to another desolate place where birds did not lay eggs. It was not a big deal. Not far ahead was the valley that Yang Chen wanted to go to. The shape of the valley was very special. From the top, it looked like a gourd. If an ordinary person wanted to go in, they would have to go through the small mouth of the gourd. The target that Yang Chen was looking for was at the bottom of the gourd. He needed to go through a narrow passage between 2 open spaces. This kind of terrain was not difficult for a human immortal level cultivator at all. When Yang Chen was planning to fly directly in, a warning sign appeared in his heart. He instantly stopped his figure, hovered in the air, and carefully stared at the surroundings. He did not know when, but above the gourd valley, a large group of ordinary-looking flying insects had appeared in an area hundreds of feet around Yang Chen. With Yang Chen as the center, they formed a huge circle of flying insects. These flying insects looked exactly the same. They were not even the size of a pinky nail. They were gray and looked inconspicuous. However, the large number of them was accompanied by a buzzing sound of flapping wings, which made people feel very uncomfortable. According to common sense, such flying insects could be smashed into a ball with a slap. However, for no reason, Yang Chen felt a sense of danger. If he forced his way in, it was likely that he would be entangled by these flying insects. Taking out an ordinary flying sword, Yang Chen gently flicked his finger. The flying sword flew straight into the group of flying insects hundreds of feet away. Yang Chen did not use his spiritual sense to control the sword. He purely relied on brute force to flick it over. However, on the flying sword, Yang Chen attached a thread of spiritual sense to let him know what would happen. As soon as the flying sword reached the group of flying insects, just as Yang Chen expected from the beginning, the sharp edge of the sword cut a flying insect that happened to touch the blade into 2. Everything seemed normal, but what happened next directly made Yang Chen feel a chill down his spine. In that direction, countless flying insects suddenly rushed to the flying sword, as if the flying sword was a delicious food, gnawing at it madly. The noise of the crunching could be heard even from hundreds of feet away by Yang Chen. The flying sword, under the crazy gnawing of the flying insects, disappeared without a trace before it fell to the ground. It was all swallowed by these inconspicuous little flying insects. Not only the flying sword, but even the thread of spiritual sense attached to the flying sword by Yang Chen seemed to have become a delicious food for the flying insects. A few flying insects desperately entangled the thread of spiritual sense, and Yang Chen immediately felt a pain. It was the pain from the spiritual sense, as if the pain was spontaneously generated in the depths of the soul. Yang Chen made a prompt decision and took the initiative to cut off the thread of spiritual sense. The moment after he cut it off, he saw that from the flying sword to the place where the thread of spiritual sense was cut off, countless flying insects formed a thin line, and the arrangement was exactly the shape of the thread of spiritual sense. In the blink of an eye, the feeling of the thread of spiritual sense disappeared, as if it had never existed. What kind of insect was this? Not only could it swallow the flying sword, but it could also swallow the spiritual sense. If it were not for Yang Chen's vigilance and using his spiritual sense to control the sword, most of his spiritual sense would have been corroded. Chapter 16:12. Even with Yang Chen's knowledge, he didn't know what this flying insect was. It was a little scary to think about it. If he rushed up regardless, it was definitely the initiative to send meat to the tiger's mouth. Fortunately, the intuition saved Yang Chen's life. Since the danger had been discovered, it was much better than the danger or the unknown situation. He just had to find a way to deal with it. To reach the bottom of the gourd valley, Yang Chen must pass through the encirclement of these insects. It was not known why these insects only surrounded Yang Chen and did not swarm up. However, these insects at least had a weakness that could be used. That was, they were not very strong, and ordinary flying sword could cut them. Of course, there was another better thing to deal with such a swarm of insects. That was fire. As long as it was an insect, it was usually afraid of fire, and Yang Chen happened to be an expert in playing with fire. Pa! After a loud snap, 2 fire dragons, one black and one white, rushed out of Yang Chen's body and roared toward the insects in 2 directions. After burning the fire cultivator of Qi Min sect last time, Yang Chen's yin-yang heaven-burning fire once again appeared in the spiritual world. Unlike the roaring yin-yang fire dragon at that time, the 2 fire dragons that appeared this time were slender like 2 chopsticks, and the length was only a few feet. They were 2 miniature versions of the fire dragons. Yang Chen still felt that something was wrong. Even if he used his own yin-yang heaven-burning fire, he still couldn't relieve the fear in his heart. This was the natal fire seed. Yang Chen easily separated such a trace and rushed into the swarm. Boom! 2 thin fire dragons seemed to have directly rushed into the kerosene, instantly igniting a large number of flying insects. The flames rapidly spread among the flying insects, and in the blink of an eye, more than half of the valley was turned into a burning sea of fire. Looking at the scene in front of him, Yang Chen took a long breath, as if he had avoided some danger, hovering in the same place, motionless. The intense flames burned for a long time before they slowly extinguished. However, the frightening thing was that the flying insects that were surrounded by the flames did not disappear. With Yang Chen's eyesight, he could naturally see that the flames on the flying insects were slowly extinguishing, but the flying insects were still intact. Not only that, the flying insects were originally gray and unremarkable, but under the burning of the flames this time, the bodies of the flying insects showed a bright red color. The surrounding gray circle immediately turned into a bright red circle, but the buzzing sound was still there. Even the yin-yang heaven-burning fire was not afraid of the flying insects. No wonder Yang Chen would have a feeling of fear in his heart, and even he did not dare to fully release his own life source fire seed at the beginning. Those flying insects were not afraid of burning at all, and even in the process of burning, they were still devouring the flames of the yin-yang heaven-burning fire to supplement themselves. It looked like the flames were extinguished on their bodies, but they were actually swallowed into their stomachs. No wonder there were no people in this place. Not even other living things could be seen. There was this group of flying insects that seemed to be able to devour even the spiritual awareness. What other living things could live here was really strange. Now it was certain that this place was definitely not the one found by his friend in the immortal world. That friend did not encounter such a terrifying thing at that time. However, if you think about it from another point of view, it was not a bad thing to have such a terrifying flying insect here. Everyone understood that the more powerful the power used to guard or defend, the more precious the thing being guarded or defended was. And these strange and creepy flying insects in front of him obviously meant that Yang Chen was going to unlock the seal. Perhaps it was a more exciting master than a fairy immortal master or something else. Thinking so, but Yang Chen was not sure what it was. In particular, the most important thing now was to get through the encirclement of these flying insects. Otherwise, no matter how many ideas he had, they could only be ideas. Not afraid of fire, not afraid of ordinary flying sword, and also able to devour spiritual awareness. With these factors, Yang Chen did not know what to do. Fortunately, it seemed that these flying insects would not take the initiative to attack as long as Yang Chen did not enter the valley, and Yang Chen's current height should still be out of the alert range of those flying insects. Now Yang Chen was already hesitating whether he had to enter this valley or not. Obviously, this was not the place where his friend found the fairy Immortal Master to guard. Yang Chen was not sure if there was an expert sealed here or if there was a hidden magic weapon. If it was an expert, Yang Chen could not be sure that the expert would be grateful. Therefore, at this time, it should be the safest choice for Yang Chen to turn back. However, at this time, Yang Chen was really unwilling to give up. Hovering in place, Yang Chen began to struggle in his heart. In his previous life, he had always been running for his life and struggling at death's door. He had never thought about fighting back. Later, he was captured by the people of the mysterious Heaven sect, and he had lost the will and ability to resist. At that time, he just wanted to survive and find an opportunity. Now that he had started over, should he still seek luck and avoid danger like he did in his previous life? In a mortal world, just as Li Cheng had said, there were not many people worthy of Yang Chen personally killing. However, now that he was in the spiritual realm, the immortal beheading blade could truly go on a killing spree. Facing these seemingly ferocious flying insects, was it necessary for him to temporarily avoid them? This was not only a question Yang Chen was asking himself, but also a question for his mentality when he faced the mysterious Heaven sect's life and death enemies in the future. If he retreated today because he was afraid of some flying insects, would he retreat tomorrow when he faced the experts of the mysterious Heaven sect? After a long time, Yang Chen let out a sigh of relief and finally made a decision. Even if there were countless difficulties and dangers in front of him, Yang Chen had to go through them. Weren't they just some troublesome flying insects? Was there really no other way? Could they devour divine sense? What would happen if their divine sense was blocked? If they were not afraid of fire, what would happen if they were replaced by highly toxic and corrosive water? Yang Chen understood that there was no creature in this world that was truly without weaknesses, and there was no creature that could truly devour everything. These flying insects were no exception. They must have something they were afraid of. Pung! A cloud of black smoke suddenly erupted beside Yang Chen. The smoke formed a ball of several dozen feet and completely wrapped around Yang Chen's figure. The black ball of fog began to slowly descend and fly toward the bottom of the valley. After flying past a certain direction, all the flying insects seemed to be summoned by something and flew towards the fog ball in a frenzy. Chapter 16:13. The flying insects at the forefront made a hissing sound as soon as they touched the black mist, and then there was a cloud of white smoke at the edge of the black mist ball. Soon, the entire black mist ball was shrouded in white smoke, turning into a white ball with white smoke everywhere. The flying insects that had already rushed into the black ball let out a series of sharp hisses, accompanied by a terrifying buzzing sound. Anyone who heard it would involuntarily shiver. The black mist was not only a black mist, but under the cover of the black mist was a black water ball. When the flying insects collided with the water ball, they were corroded into white smoke. The water ball was thick enough to withstand dozens of layers of flying insects rushing in. According to the flying speed of the flying insects, it was impossible to break through and enter the innermost layer until they were completely corroded. Even with the terrifying devouring ability of the flying insects, they were helpless against this black mist, let alone the black water ball that would be served as soon as they came into contact with it. When the sharp hissing sounds rang out, the flying insects that were flying in the back seemed to have heard some kind of command. They quickly stopped outside the black mist ball and didn't rush in anymore. No one knew how many flying insects there were. Millions upon millions of flying insects were wrapped around the black mist ball, forming an even larger red ball. The ball made a teeth-aching, buzzing sound and slowly descended to the bottom of the valley with the black mist ball in the middle. The black mist was, of course, Yang Chen's 9 Serenities flying sword. The 9 Serenities flying sword that had absorbed enough demonic energy could completely isolate the exploration of divine awareness. This also led to that even if Yang Chen was using divine awareness to control the sword. Those flying insects could not devour Yang Chen's divine awareness at all. The black water in the inner layer was Yang Chen's ninth water flying sword. This black water was originally some poisonous water secreted by the ultimate demonized demonic vine of the demon continent. As Yang Chen expected, those flying insects that could devour the flying sword, devour divine awareness, and even devour flames might be able to swallow the black water, but they couldn't resist the poison of the black water and were corroded cleanly in the struggle. At this point, Yang Chen was completely relieved. With these two flying swords, at least Yang Chen was in an invincible position. The flying insects were very smart. After the flying insects in front were corroded, the ones in the back immediately stopped taking the initiative to die, but surrounded Yang Chen. They couldn't get in, and Yang Chen couldn't get out. The two were in harmony, and it could be regarded as reaching a temporary balance. Yang Chen's mind was no longer on these flying insects. Since the flying insects could no longer threaten Yang Chen's safety, they were distributed on the periphery. On the contrary, it became a natural protective layer for Yang Chen. At least when Yang Chen spent time consuming his spiritual awareness, he would not have no resistance at all. With such a huge red flying insect ball, Yang Chen didn't fly fast, because he didn't dare to release his divine awareness easily. Everything relied on the memory of Yang Chen's observation from above. While the black mist made the flying insects unable to devour the divine awareness, it also limited Yang Chen's perception to a few feet in the black mist ball. Only in this place could Yang Chen dare to use his divine awareness to explore boldly. Just the open space at the bottom of the valley had a radius of almost dozens of miles. Yang Chen spent at least 10 days in the front and back, and this slowly explored the whole area. With the map in his sea of consciousness, with his sensitivity to certain abnormal situations, Yang Chen finally found what he was looking for. It was a formation, a huge ceiling formation. Speaking of which, Yang Chen realized after 10 days that the entire bottom of the valley was actually the distribution range of that formation. What Yang Chen was looking for was just the array eye of the ceiling formation. The flying insects were very mysterious, but Yang Chen was not unfamiliar with the ceiling formation. In the Immortal world, Yang Chen had seen this kind of ceiling formation. The strange thing was that this ceiling formation would consume a lot of spiritual power, and there was no visible spiritual vein around the valley. He really didn't know how this formation lasted until now. As Yang Chen had always expected, this formation required a lot of divine awareness to unlock the seal. Yang Chen had found the right array eye, and also found the place where he should enter the divine awareness. Next, it should be a long process of unsealing the divine awareness. After understanding this formation, Yang Chen's last worry also disappeared. This formation was indeed used to seal an expert. When it was sealed, the sealed expert would fall into a deep sleep without any consciousness. In the process of unsealing, the sealed expert would continue to be invaded by the divine awareness of the person who unsealed them. After being unconsciously invaded by the divine awareness of the person who unsealed them for a long time, they would naturally feel a sense of closeness to the person who unsealed them and would never immediately deal with the person who unsealed them. This was also the reason why Yang Chen's friend spent hundreds of years to unlock the seal, and the sealed expert took the initiative to become his guard. If there was no accident, in the near future, Yang Chen would also have an unknown cultivation level expert as a guard. Yang Chen was looking forward to it. With the layers of flying insects outside, constantly making buzzing sounds, Yang Chen felt a lot safer. After finding a suitable place, Yang Chen took out the black jade praying mat from a long time ago, sat cross-legged on it, pressed his hands in a certain place, closed his eyes, and began to output the divine awareness. The red flying insects could not all be concentrated around Yang Chen, so half of them were divided to completely surround Yang Chen and the black fog ball, while the other half continued to spread throughout the valley. In addition to the valley changing from the original gray color to a bright red, everything else did not seem to have changed. The only way to unlock this seal formation was to use a powerful divine awareness to break the seal bit by bit. The seal was condensed by the divine awareness, used to block the mind of the expert, so it could only be cracked with the divine awareness. Yang Chun now had a lot of divine awareness, and it belonged to the kind of divine awareness that would backfire on him if he did not consume it in a short time. From the white ball, there was a steady stream of divine awareness being condensed. Even if Yang Chun kept using it to repair the seeds of divine awareness left in the mortal world, there was still some left over. Now the remaining part was used as the key to unlock this seal formation, madly pouring into the seal of the formation. With the massive consumption of the divine awareness, Yang Chun finally felt a long-lost relaxation. The condensed divine awareness that seeped out of the ball, for the first time, did not accumulate in the sea of consciousness and began to slowly decrease. Yang Chun also tried to adjust the speed of the output of divine awareness, striving to be able to achieve a balance between the release and consumption of divine awareness. Just as Yang Chun was quietly outputting his divine awareness, from several directions in the valley, several groups of people came at the same time. Chapter 16:14. Yang Chun's spirit sense was limited to a radius of a few meters, so it was impossible for him to know what was going on outside. If he could see them, he would definitely recognize them. Among these people, there were a few cultivators that he had asked for directions before. "Are you sure they are here? Are you sure?" A person who seemed to be the leader of the group was confirming with another cultivator. "I'm listening very carefully. This is the gourd cave." The cultivator was one of the cultivators Yang Chun had asked for directions before. He was afraid that the person in front of him wouldn't believe him, so he almost swore an oath. That's right, they must be here. When the gourd cave entered their field of vision, no one doubted it anymore. The originally dusky scenery of the gourd cave had now turned into a bright red. It would be strange if there were no changes in the near future. Not only this group of people, but the people who rushed over from other directions also saw this scene. For a moment, everyone's heart trembled. The cultivators who often moved around Yinluo Mountain knew how powerful the gourd cave was. It was best not to enter without full confidence. Those flying insects looked very weak, and they were indeed very weak when killed. However, there were too many of them. Moreover, they could devour almost all magic treasures and divine sense. Just these 2 points were enough to make most cultivators retreat in the face of overwhelming odds. It wasn't that no one had come to investigate. 2 middle-grade sect and 4 or 5 groups of rogue cultivators have been defeated here. There was even a sect that lost more than 300 experts, dozens of Earth Immortals, more than 200 human Immortals, and an early-stage Heaven Immortal expert. None of them returned. Since then, no one dared to have any ideas about the gourd cave. Unfortunately, they didn't dare to use their spirit sense to explore, so they didn't know the situation inside the gourd cave. They only knew the general layout of the terrain. No one knew what was inside the gourd cave. The most people guessed was that there should be an insect queen at the bottom of the valley, constantly producing flying insects. Otherwise, the number of flying insects wouldn't be so high. More than 90% of the flying insects in the gourd cave were killed in the most tragic battle. However, the number quickly recovered after the battle. It was impossible for the flying insects to not reproduce. These inconspicuous little insects were called celestial devouring insects in Yinluo Mountain. They could devour heaven immortals, earth immortals, and human immortals. Many people were interested in the things inside the gourd cave. Even though there was no spirit vein, there must be a spiritual item that could breed such magical insects. Needless to say, some experts who played with insects were also interested in the celestial devouring insects, but they didn't know the way. Even those who had nothing to do with them coveted the possible spiritual item. Few people who were active in Yinluo Mountain did not know about the gourd cave and the immortal eating insect. So Yang Chun's act of asking for directions completely exposed that he was a stranger. He only asked for directions, but didn't ask about the celestial devouring bug. It was either that he didn't know, or he knew a way to deal with the celestial devouring bug. Yang Chun thought it was a normal question, but he didn't know the reason behind it. Those people were surprised and went back to talk about it. Immediately, Some people felt that something was wrong and came to investigate. Looking at the bright red in front of them, everyone knew that something must have happened here. They had never heard of such a change before. What happened? No one dared to act rashly. Everyone found each other with their eyes, but no one paid attention to the other teams. Everyone was analyzing whether this change was good or bad. According to common sense, the brighter the color of the insects, the more ferocious they were. This color was a warning color to any creatures that tried to get close. But there were exceptions. Some insects with weak abilities could mimic this color and disguise themselves as fierce insects. What kind of situation was this? Someone carefully threw a low-grade magic treasure far away. According to the legend, this magic treasure would soon be attacked by the celestial devouring insects and be quickly devoured. But after waiting for a long time, they didn't see any immortal devouring insects pouncing on a magic treasure. At most, a small group of insects flew away to avoid the magic treasure, and when the magic treasure landed, they gathered again. In the past, no one would come here to check if the celestial devouring insects could really devour magic treasures. Cultivators were not curious people and had to figure something out unless it was something they were particularly interested in. Now that everyone saw that the legend was not true, they immediately had different thoughts. What was going on? Everyone was a little confused. Could it be that the kid who asked for directions had a unique way to change the habits of these celestial devouring insects and stop devouring magic treasures and divine sense, so people could naturally enter the Gourd Valley? Thinking about it carefully, this was very likely. Otherwise, there was no way to explain the color change of the celestial devouring insects, nor could it explain why the magic treasure landed safely. According to the legend, ordinary magic treasures will be devoured before they even landed. Everyone's heart was filled with excitement. No matter what, since the celestial devouring insects had changed and they had caught up, it was a heaven-sent opportunity. If they did not seize it, wouldn't it be a reckless waste of God's gift? Action was better than action. Immediately, someone looked around with sensitivity, and then his figure shot out, flying crazily toward the bottom of the valley. With someone taking the lead, the rest of the people naturally followed suit, fearing that they would be left behind, rushing to be the first to fly out. It was the same in several directions. Even if they did not know what was at the bottom of the valley, it could not stop their greedy footsteps. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Hundreds of figures shot into the bright red, celestial devouring insects like arrows, accompanied by bursts of cheerful laughter, as if they had already seen the valley full of magic treasures and spirit items quietly waiting for them to reach out and grab. Almost at the next moment, the cheerful laughter suddenly turned into mournful screams. Countless celestial devouring insects swarmed up as if they had seen a delicious meal, instantly surrounding the hundreds of figures. Noisy crunching sounds like chewing could be heard everywhere, and the same number of red insect balls, accompanied by bursts of screams, fell madly to the bottom of the Gourd Valley. Before falling to the bottom of the valley, those insect balls had already dispersed and turned into individual celestial devouring insects. As for those figures, they had already disappeared without a trace. Not a single trace of them was left. If there was a medicine for regret, those who rushed in would definitely understand a truth. It was not that the celestial devouring insects had no interest in magic treasures, but after eating Yang Chen's Yin-Yang heaven-burning fire, they had no interest in ordinary magic treasures. Chapter 16:15. Yang Chen didn't know about these things, and even if he knew, he wouldn't be interested. At most, he would sigh with emotion that even insects could improve his taste. As for those who died because of greed, Yang Chen wouldn't even sigh. The seal formation in the Gourd Cave was the best tool to devour spiritual awareness. Yang Chen's spiritual awareness could feel, through his own devoured spiritual awareness, that the seal inside was weakening little by little, and the powerful existence that was sealed was also getting rid of the shackles little by little. Yang Chen's spiritual awareness output was stable and efficient. The spiritual awareness that seeped out of the ball, in addition to nourishing the spiritual awareness seed in the mortal world, was almost all assimilated in Yang Chen's sea of consciousness. After being tempered, It would be all put into the seal formation by Yang Chun as a weapon to attack the core of the seal. The spiritual awareness of a great principal golden immortal, after being condensed by the white ball and transformed by the three purities secret art, was simply beyond anyone's imagination. Even the person who arranged the seal formation probably wouldn't have thought that there would be such a terrifying guy like Yang Chun in the spiritual world. In order to unlock a similar seal, Yang Chun's friend, who was still in the early Earth Immortal stage, spent hundreds of years to use his own spiritual awareness to grind open the seal little by little. Now, it only took Yang Chun a short year to feel that the seal had a little loosening. It seemed that it would take no more than 10 years to completely unlock it. It was normal to think about it. Now Yang Chun's spiritual awareness cultivation base had reached the first grade of the fairy immortal realm. If it wasn't for Yang Chun's active suppression, it wouldn't be a problem to rush to a higher realm. In the past, Yang Chun's friend could only grind the seal intermittently. When his spiritual awareness was exhausted, he needed to cultivate again to recover. But Yang Chun now had almost infinite spiritual awareness, constantly scouring the seal. Shortening the time by dozens of times was not abrupt at all. During this period, Yang Chun did not delay his normal cultivation. Like other people in Chunyang Palace, he had no advanced version of the source cultivation method. Now, he could only continue to practice. Fortunately, Yang Chun already had the state of mind of a perfected golden immortal, so his cultivation was not affected at all. Three purities secret art, Great Yin and Yang 5 elements secret art, Yellow turban strongman body refining technique, Universe treasure raising secret art, Heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art, and Earth fiend sacrificial formation secret art. With these celestial devouring insects as natural barriers, Yang Chun didn't even need to use other methods of protection. Even if someone could break through the celestial devouring insects, it was impossible to approach Yang Chun under the protection of the 9 serenities flying sword and the 9 water flying sword. Every day, the monotonous cultivation, the constant tempering of his spiritual awareness, made Yang Chun's spiritual awareness strong to an incredible level. The three purities secret art has been improved unconsciously. It was originally in the early stage of the 4th layer, but now under this situation, it has entered the middle stage of the 4th layer. In the past, Yang Chun had never dared to improve the realm of the three purities secret art, because he was afraid that it would cause the spiritual awareness to split. Now, under the premise that there was no sign of the spiritual awareness splitting at all, the realm of the three purities secret art has been improved, which really made Yang Chun pleasantly surprised. The spiritual awareness threads in the sea of consciousness seemed to have become finer and more elusive, but Yang Chun could clearly feel that these spiritual awareness threads were getting tougher and more flexible. By controlling the flying sword, it will have a stronger power, and at the same time, it will have a greater flexibility. Xiao Tian seemed to feel the changes in Yang Chun and took the initiative to appear beside Yang Chun. Now Xiao Tian's body was getting bigger and bigger. Usually, he would not appear beside Yang Chun. Only when fighting would he obediently become Yang Chun's sword. Having been cultivating the Dragon Clan's cultivation method, Xiao Tian's realm was also increasing day by day. Today, when it suddenly appeared, it seemed to have noticed the changes in Yang Chun. It happily flew around Yang Chun and wanted to express something. Yang Chun quickly understood and took the initiative to send the spiritual awareness that had changed again into the body of Xiao Tian. In an instant, Xiao Tian seemed to enjoy something extremely delicious and immediately stopped flying. He quietly enjoyed the connection with Yang Chun's spiritual awareness, and his body seemed to be undergoing a little subtle change. Unknowingly, the seal had almost been unraveled by half. Yang Chun didn't realize the passage of time. When he noticed that even some of the surrounding immortal eating insects were contaminated with his spiritual awareness aura, he discovered that 3 years had passed. What made Yang Chun feel strange was that the immortal eating insects that could devour the spiritual awareness didn't devour Yang Chun's spiritual awareness. He didn't know what happened. What made Yang Chun even more puzzled was that his own spiritual awareness had been sealed within the range of the 9th nether flying sword and the 9th water flying sword. How did those immortal eating insects contaminate his spiritual awareness? With this question, Yang Chun continued to attack the seal, and in a blink of an eye, another year had passed. The seal had been unraveled by 2/3, and Yang Chun could even feel that the sealed master was slowly waking up, and at the same time, he was also suffering from the washing of Yang Chen's huge spiritual awareness. At this point, Yang Chun had a new discovery. Under the entire gourd cave, there was a huge and surprising spiritual power that was constantly maintaining the operation of the seal formation. This spiritual power was so huge that it was not inferior to an ordinary heaven immortal level spiritual pulse. Soon, Yang Chun figured out the clues. The place of the gourd cave was located at the intersection of several earth immortal level spiritual pulses, and it was not without reason. Those so-called earthly immortal spirit veins were actually a few heaven immortal spirit veins. However, someone had used a powerful formation to concentrate most of the spiritual power in the gourd cave. That was why the rest of the veins were earthly immortal spirit veins. This was probably the great work of the ancestors of the Zhao family. In a mortal world, Yang Chun had seen the great work of the Zhao family once, and the entire demon continent was opened up by the hands of the ancestors of the Zhao family. He just didn't know what the ancestors of the Zhao family wanted to do with these sealing formations. Was it to leave some life-saving capital for their descendants? In any case, the master sealed inside would no longer have anything to do with the Zhao family from now on. He believed that when the mystery was revealed, the Zhao family would definitely be shocked, especially when the master left behind by the ancestors of the Zhao family was used as a weapon to attack the Zhao family. The feeling would be even stronger. Everything in the gourd cave happened so peacefully, but there was no such peace outside the gourd cave. More than 100 people went to explore the gourd cave and then disappeared. It soon attracted the attention of several nearby forces, and everyone soon discovered the changes in the immortal eating insects in the gourd cave. Everyone's eyes were temporarily focused on the gourd cave. Chapter 16:16. With the disappearance of more than 100 people, no one dared to risk their lives to see if the celestial devouring insects had become vegetarians. Even if the celestial devouring insects ignored the magic treasures they threw in, no one dared to act rashly. It wasn't that no one had tried to deal with the celestial devouring insects in other ways, such as burning them with fire as a snack. Wood attribute magic treasures were appetizers, and metal attribute magic treasures were even harder to deal with. If anyone got close, they would be directly devoured. The celestial devouring insects were not interested in earth attribute magic treasures, but no one dared to rush into the celestial devouring insects with earth attribute magic treasures. In other words, as long as one used a magic treasure, one had to use divine sense. Even a simple command required divine sense. Once the divine sense leaked, the celestial devouring insects would crazily devour it. The result of the divine sense being devoured was that the sea of consciousness would shake violently, and then it would be out of control, causing more divine sense to leak out. In the end, even if the cultivator wrapped himself tightly with earth attribute magic treasures, he would not be able to escape death. After death, it looked like the corpse was intact, but the divine sense had been completely devoured. Speaking of which, water seemed to be able to deal with the celestial devouring insects, but that was just the appearance. Ordinary water couldn't stop the attacks of the celestial devouring insects at all. Even if it was a highly corrosive poisonous water, if it didn't reach the level of the ultimate demonized vine essence, it wouldn't have much effect on the celestial devouring insects. The death of hundreds of celestial devouring insects couldn't stop them. Instead, it would make them even more ferocious. Only a barrier that could block divine sense and had a highly corrosive poison could block the all-pervasive attacks of the celestial devouring insects. It just so happened that Yang Chun had both, and the people outside couldn't think of it. Even if they thought of it, they might not be able to do it. However, the gourd cave was indeed changing, and the color of the celestial devouring insects began to change again. Some of the celestial devouring insects changed from bright red to a relatively reserved red. Of course, this change was only a part of it, and it was only the part near a certain area. The celestial devouring insects in other areas were still bright red. Since there was a change, it meant that there must be a reason for the change in the valley. Whatever it was, it had firmly attracted the attention of several forces. Even though they didn't dare to get close, it didn't stop them from paying attention to it for a long time. To a certain extent, the thing that cultivators lacked the least was time. What they wanted to know was the reason for the changes here and the benefits that these changes might bring to them. In the blink of an eye, a few years had passed. Yang Chun had already sensed that the unbreakable seal was only a matter of time. And at most half a year, the seal would completely dissipate. Yang Chun still didn't know what kind of expert was sealed, but that expert had already begun to awaken. Yang Chun could feel this process from the spiritual awareness fluctuations in the seal, and the spiritual awareness fluctuations inside had become more and more obvious. The huge amount of spiritual energy underground had been supplying this sealing array, so not a single bit of it leaked out. But now, Yang Chun had also discovered that in addition to supplying the spirit array, the combination of several spirit veins was also supplying the absorption of the expert in the spirit array. At the thought of this, Yang Chun couldn't help but feel a little shocked and a little excited at the same time. This expert, whose consciousness and everything was sealed, lay quietly in this seal, withstood the nourishment of several fairy immortal spirit veins every day. Even if he didn't take the initiative to cultivate, after a long time, his cultivation must have improved to an astonishing level. Fairy immortal expert? Yang Chun guessed that it was more than that. It was likely that he had already entered the realm of supreme master in the spiritual realm, at least at the level of golden immortal. If such an expert could become his friend, the safety of Chunyang Palace would basically be at ease in the future. Being sealed within a radius of a few feet by the celestial eating bugs, Yang Chun didn't dare to explore with his spiritual consciousness. Naturally, he wouldn't find that 99% of the celestial eating bugs in the entire Gourd Valley had changed. Most of the celestial eating bugs had turned into a restrained red color and were no longer bright. Those people who had been watching the changes in the Gourd Valley could only watch helplessly as the color of the celestial eating bugs changed over the years. However, at this point, the day when all the celestial eating bugs changed was the day when a mystery was revealed. The experts of several forces also began to gather near the Gourd Valley, each occupying a direction, watching from afar, waiting for the day when all the changes were completed. In any case, this was their territory, their sphere of influence. In any case, they had to know what was going on and what benefits it would bring them. Finally, under everyone's expectations, the last celestial eating bug also finished changing its color. Yang Chun, who was at the bottom of the valley, clearly sensed that the huge seal suddenly dissipated at this moment. The seal formation shattered, and a huge spiritual power could no longer be sealed, rushing straight into the sky. The experts waiting outside suddenly sensed the torrent of spiritual power and couldn't believe their senses. A heaven immortal level spiritual vein. Not only that, but it could also reach the golden immortal level. It actually appeared in the Gourd Valley, a place where there had never been any spiritual fluctuations before. With the eruption of the spiritual vein, the dark red celestial eating bugs seemed to be unable to withstand the sudden spiritual impact. All of them were swept up high, and then, under the gaze of the people in the distance, they swayed and fell down. The hair-raising, buzzing sound of flapping wings had suddenly disappeared. It was so quiet that people were a little unaccustomed to it. No one seemed to have noticed this. Everyone stared blankly at the slowly falling celestial eating bugs, not knowing what to think. Something even more surprising happened in front of everyone's eyes. All the celestial devouring insects floated down to the ground, motionless, without any signs of life. Countless celestial eating bugs covered the entire ground of the Gourd Valley, turning the Gourd Valley into a dark red valley. What's going on? How did those celestial eating bugs suddenly become like this? Under the signal of the leaders of several forces, 4 or 5 cannon fodder, carefully moved closer to observe, and some even threw some stones to see what was going on. No matter what they did, the celestial eating bugs remained motionless. When someone carefully used a strand of divine sense to check, he found that his divine sense was not devoured, so he felt more at ease and released more divine sense. Finally, he found that these terrifying celestial devouring insects had become empty shells. They were dead. Chapter 16:17. All the celestial devouring insects were dead. The scouts could not believe that such a thing had happened. After confirming it a few times, they were overjoyed and quickly reported the discovery to the leaders of their respective forces. A golden immortal spiritual vein and the death of all the celestial devouring insects made the Gourd Valley a huge, juicy piece of meat in the eyes of several forces. The formless door is on a mission. Outsiders, get out of the way. This is the territory of the White Tiger Hall. Anyone who dares to enter will be the enemy of the White Tiger Hall, the Heaven Marshal City. Almost at the same time, several forces shouted out their signboards. Yinluo Mountain was not a peaceful place to begin with. The various forces in the sect were intertwined with each other, and the one with the biggest fist had the final say. Now that there was a newly discovered golden, immortal spiritual vein, no one would fall behind. Everyone knew what a golden, immortal spiritual vein meant to a cultivator and a force. If it did not fight for it now, when would they? Why did the celestial devouring insects die? It must be because they could not withstand a spiritual vein of this level, so their spiritual power exploded and they died. If they had known that it was so easy to kill the celestial devouring insects, they would have tried this method. However, it was too early for everyone to be happy. At the beginning, there was an explosion of spiritual power because the underground spirit vein had been sealed by the Array Formation for who knew how many years. Everyone rushed forward in a frenzy to grab a good spot, but before they reached the bottom of the Gourd Valley, the spiritual power had weakened. But even though the spiritual power had weakened, it still felt like a heaven immortal spiritual vein. The leaders of several forces around them were envious. The spiritual vein they had worked so hard to occupy was only an earth immortal spiritual vein. A heaven immortal spiritual vein was definitely worth risking their lives for. In the middle was the eruption of spiritual power from a spirit vein. In the surrounding directions, there were cultivators with red eyes. All of them had already taken out their life source magic treasures. From time to time, their vigilant eyes flashed in all directions. The scene was like a huge bomb that could explode at any moment. "What's that?" A surprised voice awakened the cultivators who were about to make a move. Everyone's eyes were focused on the bottom of the Gourd Valley. White smoke was rising from that location. The corpses of the celestial devouring insects were slowly disappearing, and soon, a cloud of black mist was revealed. The black mist was still emitting white smoke, which was very strange. The sudden change in the situation calmed the people who were about to start a fight. Everyone's attention was focused on that location. Perhaps that was where the real secret of the Gourd Cove was, and no one wanted to miss it. When there were no more corpses of the celestial devouring insects above the black mist, the white smoke finally disappeared. That area had become the only black circle in the dark red. Countless people probed with their divine senses, but as soon as they came into contact with the black fog, they would feel uneasy. Their divine senses were unable to penetrate the black fog and see what was inside. Everyone who saw this was ecstatic. The sudden explosion of the heaven immortal spirit vein had killed all the celestial devouring insects. Now, they would have a chance to see the ultimate secret of the Gourd Cave. However, with the previous lesson of the celestial devouring insects, everyone withdrew their divine senses once they realized that their divine senses could not penetrate the black fog. They stared at the black fog nervously, thinking about how to solve the secret. Yang Chen finally saw the appearance of the awakened expert. To Yang Chen's surprise, the sealed expert turned out to be a demon race. His original body was a celestial devouring insect that had been enlarged several times. In addition to the difference in size, the color of the body was also different. The small celestial eating insects outside at first were gray in color, then turned into bright red, and finally became a restrained dark red that Yang Chun did not see. This celestial eating insect was black. Only in some parts there were some white lines. It had a black body and a pair of black wings. They were dark and shiny, and there were clear white lines dotted on them. The celestial devouring insect was only half the size of Yang Chen's body. Its two huge compound eyes did not seem to have the slightest vitality. It stared at Yang Chun, but Yang Chun could not be sure whether it was looking at him or not. The celestial devouring insect did not emit a strong aura, but Yang Chun had no doubt that it was definitely a supreme golden immortal expert who had surpassed the heaven immortal level. Fortunately, Yang Chun did not feel afraid because there was a familiar feeling coming from the celestial devouring insect, as if it had been in contact with Yang Chun for hundreds of thousands of years. There was a sense of familiarity in the relaxed feeling. Yang Chun understood that this should be the benefit he gained after using his divine sense to unlock the seal. At least this supreme golden immortal expert would not treat him as an enemy. "Who are you?" The celestial devouring insect did not have the slightest hostility towards Yang Chun and naturally sent out a divine sense to contact Yang Chun. A strange voice immediately sounded in Yang Chen's mind. After asking Yang Chun a question, the celestial devouring insect put on a pondering posture and then asked another question, "Who am I?" After being sealed for tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years, or even longer, the celestial devouring insect had completely forgotten its identity. Even in its mind, there was no other impression except for the memory of Yang Chen's divine sense constantly unlocking the seal in recent years. It did not even remember who it was. Junior Yang Chun. Through the beast-controlling secret art, Yang Chun easily transmitted his thoughts to the other party's mind. He first introduced himself, and then answered the second question of the celestial devouring insect. Senior's identity. Junior does not know. "I remember you. You helped me open the shackles and let me out." The celestial devouring insect did not entangle itself on its identity, but talked about its memory of Yang Chun. "The two kinds of fire on you are very delicious. Your divine sense is also very delicious. It is good for me. I don't like these things of yours." At this moment, Yang Chun had already discovered the abnormality outside. All the celestial devouring insects had died, but the celestial devouring insect in front of him said that his yin-yang heaven-burning fire was delicious. Suddenly, Yang Chun understood something. The many celestial devouring insects outside were simply the clones of this celestial devouring insect. The main body was firmly sealed in the array, but those clones were still protecting itself and the array. Now that the main body was free, naturally all the clones had returned to the main body. Those bodies were naturally useless. It seemed that all of them were dead, but in fact, they had just changed into another form. What the celestial devouring insect did not like was naturally the 9 nether flying sword and the 9th water flying sword. Now that the celestial devouring insect was no longer a threat, Yang Chun also put away the flying sword and revealed his figure. The people outside finally saw the scene in the black mist. To their surprise, there was only a human immortal junior inside. Chapter 16:18. The one who appeared in front of everyone was just a human immortal junior? How was this possible? Countless people who saw this had the same question in their minds. However, the big shots of the major powers had different thoughts. In any case, Yang Chun had appeared in front of everyone. It could be said that he was at the bottom of Gourd Valley from the beginning. Not all the people Yang Chun asked for directions were gone. There was still one left. One of the big shots of White Tiger Hall happened to know that a human immortal junior asked for directions to Gourd Valley 10 years ago. Later on, the immortal devouring insects in Gourd Valley changed. This human immortal junior was definitely the one who asked for directions back then. Since he was alive and well now, it meant that he knew the secret of Gourd Valley. "Little brother, come on my White Tiger Hall. No one will dare to touch a hair on your head." After thinking it through, the hall master immediately shouted at Yang Chun, "I didn't have the time to properly entertain you last time. You must make up for it this time." As long as he could pull Yang Chun over to White Tiger Hall's side, Even if it wasn't real, he would gain the upper hand by a show of strength. This junior in Gourd Valley should understand the current situation. Without the support of others, a puny human immortal junior like him would definitely die without a burial place. So what if he knew the secret of Gourd Valley? Wealth moved people's hearts. Cultivators were no exception. If they wanted to live long, they had to be sharp-eyed. Once Yang Chun was smart enough to climb up the ladder, everything would be easy. How could a puny human immortal junior keep secrets in front of so many experts? Gourd Valley was ultimately under White Tiger Hall's control. Hearing the Hall Master's words, the people of the other major powers immediately cursed inwardly. If this person was an acquaintance of White Tiger Hall, wouldn't it mean that White Tiger Hall would get most of the benefits from Gourd Valley? Yang Chun hasn't figured out what the situation was now. When he was thinking about how to deal with the situation in front of him, a black light suddenly flashed, but the immortal food insect flew out and appeared beside Yang Chun. A celestial eater bug that was countless times larger than an ordinary celestial eater bug with black and white lines all over its body instantly entered everyone's sight. Immortal devouring insect queen. Someone immediately exclaimed. It wasn't just one person, but a group of people. The number of celestial devouring insects in the Gourd Cave had always been the same. So it would be strange if there was no insect queen. Now that everyone had seen this different celestial devouring insect with their own eyes, their first thought was that this was the insect queen. The existence of the celestial devouring insect was the reason why no one in the Gourd Valley dared to cross the line for so many years. A celestial devouring insect might seem insignificant and could be killed with a wave of a hand, but once there were a lot of them, they would be a terrifying force, and no one would dare to ignore them. Now that all the celestial devouring insects had turned into corpses and there was only one celestial devouring insect left, this was simply a godsend opportunity. For some experts who specialized in playing with insects, a sumptuous feast had already been placed on the table, waiting for them to taste it. As for who that human immortal kid was, did it matter? Kid, you trespassed into the forbidden area. You deserve to die. An expert from the formless sect shouted without thinking. Following his words, he had already shot out like a bolt of lightning, flying toward Yang Chun. To be exact, his target was the celestial devouring insect queen, not Yang Chun. As long as he could control this celestial devouring insect queen, wouldn't it be up to him to decide how many celestial devouring insects he wanted? There was more than one smart person. As soon as the expert from the formless sect made his move, others immediately followed suit and rushed toward Yang Chun. Didn't the White Tiger Hall want to rope in Yang Chun? Now, they had to put a hat on Yang Chun for trespassing into the forbidden area. Everyone understood what the White Tiger Hall meant when they said they were familiar with each other. Who could say anything about the addition of a forbidden area? In the end, wasn't it just a matter of whose fist was bigger? Those who rushed out were all experts with some fame, at least at the Earth Immortal realm. In their eyes, Yang Chun was already a piece of meat on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Their top priority was to grab the celestial devouring insect first. Sure enough, in front of a group of experts, Yang Chun seemed to have been scared silly. He stood in place with his mouth half open, wanting to say something but unable to say anything. He was shocked but also intimidated by the imposing manner of the crowd, as if he had the power to decide his life and death. Not only Yang Chun, but even the celestial devouring insect around him seemed to be terrified. The little wings flapped so fast that the crowd could hardly see the appearance of the wings. Originally, it was hovering not far from Yang Chun, but now it moved closer to Yang Chun. If this wasn't fear, then what was it? Without the protection of a large number of celestial devouring insects, the celestial devouring insect queen was just a toy that could be played with at will. Everyone knew a little common sense. Generally speaking, the celestial devouring insect queen was responsible for reproduction, not fighting. In terms of combat power, it was much worse than the ordinary celestial devouring insects, and it usually needed the protection of ordinary celestial devouring insects. If it was in the past, no one would dare to bare their teeth in front of the celestial devouring insect queen. But now all the ordinary celestial devouring insects had been killed in the explosion of spiritual power, and their corpses were still piled up in the gourd valley below. Who would be afraid of a lone commander? With so many people surrounding them, even if Yang Chun and the celestial devouring insect queen had wings, they couldn't fly out. Didn't the celestial devouring insect queen have wings? Isn't it hiding behind Yang Chun now? They must not let others get the celestial devouring insect queen. Even if they couldn't get it, they couldn't let others get it. The people who rushed up had the same idea. These forces often fought with each other, so everyone was mentally prepared before coming out. The appearance of the celestial devouring insect queen was just a fuse. A great battle broke out without any warning. The people at the front rushed out, and the people at the back were only slightly slower, but they immediately followed suit. A celestial immortal grade spirit vein and the celestial devouring insect queen were enough to make anyone go crazy. Yang Chun and the celestial devouring insect just stood there, doing nothing, quietly watching the hundreds and thousands of cultivators fighting in front of them. Magic treasures flew everywhere, figures collided in all directions, and blood and severed limbs flew everywhere. Such a tragic battle would definitely make people think that they were mortal enemies who had killed their father and could not live under the same sky. What you said really makes sense. Looking at these crazy cultivators fighting in front of them, the celestial devouring insects thought once again passed to Yang Chen's mind. Watching them fight is really more fun than killing all of them at once. How do you know that they won't care about anything? Chapter 16:19. Was there need to guess? Yang Chen didn't want to answer the question of the celestial food bug, but thinking that the celestial food bug had lost all its memories, leaving only some instincts, and the only person who was close to was him, it was quite pitiful. He had to explain it to it and let it have a little more life experience. If other cultivators knew that a little human immortal junior, Yang Chun, was actually pitying a supreme golden immortal expert, it would definitely make more than half of the cultivators who had heard of it drop their jaws. And the remaining half would definitely slap Yang Chun without saying anything. A dignified supreme golden immortal expert. How could a little human immortal like you look up to him? Pitying him? Do you know who you are? But Yang Chen's current thoughts were really pitiful. Even if it was a demon race, it was a great expert, but it was inexplicably imprisoned and sealed, and even its memory was erased. If it wasn't for Yang Chun discovering the secret of the zither, it was unknown how long it would have been sealed. Such an expert should have been all-powerful in the world, but now it didn't even know who it was. Was it not worthy of pity? The celestial food bug had no name yet, so Yang Chun just called it Senior. It should be known that Yang Chun intended to use the celestial food bug as the treasure of Chunyang Palace, at least for 1,000 years. He could keep Chunyang Palace standing. Such an expert, of course, the smarter the better. Yang Chen didn't mind spending some time to slowly teach the celestial food bug some things. The communication between the two was carried out through divine will, so others didn't know. In the eyes of those fighting cultivators, Yang Chun and the celestial food bug were simply spoils of war, waiting for the winner to reach out and take them. The worst cultivation here was a few small realms higher than Yang Chun, a mere fourth-stage human immortal, so no one would put him in their eyes. Everyone fought in tacit understanding, and no one was near Yang Chun and the celestial food bug. No magic treasure would be blind enough to attack them, and no one would drag the two of them into the battle. In this crazy battlefield, the two of them seemed to have nothing to do with it. There were fewer and fewer cultivators on the battlefield, but the corpses of the celestial food bug in Gourd Cave were filled with cultivator corpses. Fresh blood was everywhere, and scattered, severed limbs and broken magic treasures were similarly scattered all over the ground. However, in the midst of the tragic battle, no one gave them a second glance. Unlike the others who were fighting to the death, Yang Chun and the celestial food bug were very leisurely chatting. The content of their conversation was related to the battle. The content of their conversation was to do with the battle. The immortal food bug had completely forgotten it, and even some simple truths were not understood, so it could only be explained slowly by Yang Chun. What these people were crazy for, what were they fighting for? Celestial food for. Yang Chun to be to them, for 4 for 4. 2 4 4 4 4 4 2 4 4 4 for him. 2 4 4 2 2 2 2 2 4 4 4 for him. With Yang Chen's knowledge and the strength of his spiritual sense, he could only roughly judge the cultivation level of the celestial food bug based on the strength of the spirit vein below, let alone those crazy people. Greed occupied their minds, and their reason was blinded by desire. At the same time, they basically did not have the opportunity to carefully observe and analyze the celestial food bug for a long time, so it was natural for them to make a wrong judgment. Senior, you have to have a name, right? Yang Chen finally felt that it was a bit uncomfortable to call him this, so he couldn't help but suggest, "Do I have to call you Senior every time? What if I get mixed up with the other elders? I must have had a name before, but I can't remember it." The celestial food bug's expression couldn't be seen, but the content of the conversation with Yang Chen clearly showed that he was trying hard to remember. "Just call me whatever you want. I'll talk about it when I remember. Then forgive me for being disrespectful. I'll call you Old Bug for now." Yang Chen didn't stand on ceremony and directly gave the celestial food bug a simple name first. "When you remember, I'll restore your original name." "All right." Old Bug, who was still in his insect body, agreed and didn't say anything else. "Here's a cultivation art. Old Bug, you can cultivate it." Yang Chen then gave Old Bug a copy of the Heavenly Quartz transformation art. It can change your body shape, and it can also slightly increase your cultivation base. For Yang Chen, Elder Bug had complete trust in him. Yang Chen gave him the cultivation method, and he began to ponder on it without saying anything. It was extremely easy for a Grand Supreme Golden Immortal to cultivate the transformation art. Jing Hu, who was an 8th grade Heaven Immortal, only needed a short while, but Old Bug was even faster, and he almost immediately succeeded after cultivating it once. The cultivators on the battlefield were all fighting, so no one noticed that the giant celestial food bug next to Yang Chen suddenly changed its appearance in a few breaths' time, turning into a large-eyed young man in black armor. The black armor was decorated with white lines, the same color as when the celestial food bug was in its celestial food bug form. Old Bug moved his limbs with interest, as if he was slowly getting used to his new body. Yang Chen didn't say anything and just watched Old Bug get used to his new body. Noisy. After Old Bug moved around for a while, he finally got used to his new body. He cracked his neck and complained to the cultivators on the battlefield in a low voice. Old Bug's voice wasn't loud, at least to Yang Chen's ears. But to the cultivators on the battlefield, it was like a clap of thunder. Boom! A huge sound and a supreme power erupted. All the cultivators fighting on the top of the gourd cave felt their heads shake, and they immediately fainted, falling from the sky. The sound was like dumplings falling into a pot. The cultivators who fainted should feel lucky that the ground below the gourd cave was covered with a thick layer of celestial food bug corpses, and it wasn't solid ground. Even if they fell, their lives wouldn't be in danger for the time being with their tough bodies. Unfortunately, if that was the case, then it was too early for them to be happy. Although Old Bug lost his memory, and although he was very close to Yang Chen, it didn't mean that he was really a good person. When he first discovered the cultivators, Old Bug wanted to deal with them himself, but Yang Chen stopped him and let him watch the show. Now that there was no one to act, these guys were naturally useless. Old Bug didn't know what method he used, but the dead celestial food bugs suddenly came back to life and started to chew crazily. Soon, the cultivators and their magic treasures disappeared without a trace. After devouring the cultivators, the celestial food bugs quickly turned into corpses, and then all the corpses began to slowly fly toward Old Bug's body. Chapter 16:20. The dark red bodies of the celestial devouring insects, or rather the shells of the celestial devouring insects, covered the entire gourd cave. After approaching Elder Bug, they began to quickly integrate into his armor. The speed of integration was very fast. In less than the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, so many celestial devouring insect shells had all disappeared into Elder Bug's armor. The original black armor with white lines had turned into a dark red pattern on a black background. Your two kinds of fire are still delicious. The integration of the shells seemed to bring another kind of feeling to Elder Bug. Elder Bug subconsciously licked his lips and looked at Yang Chun, almost drooling, which made people shudder. If he didn't know that Elder Bug wouldn't have any other thoughts about him for the time being, Yang Chun would have definitely been scared by Elder Bug's action. It must be known that being coveted by a supreme golden immortal expert like this was not a huge pressure that an ordinary person's heart could bear. For the time being, there won't be any changes to the flame. After I collect enough fire seeds, maybe you will like it more. Yang Chun didn't care. The fire seeds wouldn't disappear out of thin air. They would only decrease in quantity. But as long as he had enough spiritual power to supplement it, the life source fire seed would continue to be produced. By now, how could Yang Chun not know that the so-called celestial devouring insects were some of Elder Bug's clones? So, as long as the celestial devouring insects ate it, it was equivalent to Elder Bug also eating it. What Yang Chun said was not a lie. As the yin-yang heaven-burning fire could absorb and integrate more fire seeds from the spiritual world, more changes would inevitably occur. For an expert like Elder Bug who could devour flames, the stronger the yin-yang heaven-burning fire was, the more delicious it would be. Apart from Yang Chun and Elder Bug, there was no other living thing left on the scene. The cultivators who discovered the changes in the gourd cave would never have thought that they would go to a death date this time. If they knew who their opponent was, they might have been able to fight back. Perhaps they wouldn't have died so easily. Unfortunately, Old Bug had made his move, so they wouldn't have had any chance. They would have died in silence. This time, it took Yang Chun a full 10 years to unlock the seal of Elder Bug. In these 10 years, Yang Chun had already nourished the spiritual seed in the mortal world and restored everything to its heyday. But because of the characteristics of the spiritual seed, it was still in a deep sleep. Part of Yang Chun's spiritual seed's problem had also been solved. Unlocking Elder Bug's seal required an enormous amount of spirit power, which had pushed the bead in his spiritual seed to its maximum speed. Even the divine sense of a great, all-embracing golden immortal had consumed a considerable amount of it after crossing from the immortal realm to the mortal world and then to the spiritual realm. Then, it was condensed by the ball, and after unlocking the seal of Elder Bug, the sphere's ability to condense divine sense had been squeezed to the limit, and now it was basically in the process of recovering, and the amount of divine sense that seeped out was very little. At least for a few decades, Yang Chun would not have to worry about the eruption of his spiritual awareness. As for decades, Yang Chun still had 2 ancient zither in his hands, and he would continue to look for other ancient zither. He would always be able to find a way to deal with it. There was nothing left in the gourd cave except for the newly emerged heaven immortal spirit vein. Yang Chun and Old Bug didn't care about a spirit vein at all, so Yang Chun summoned a flying shuttle and left with Old Bug. The sudden appearance of a heaven immortal grade spirit vein could be sensed by cultivators who were thousands of miles away, even if they were thousands of miles away. Less than half an hour after Yang Chun and Elder Bug left, dozens of Earth Immortal cultivators arrived and saw what was going on. There were a lot of signs of fighting at the scene, but no one was left behind. This in itself was very strange. Coupled with the sudden burst of spiritual power not long ago, the Sky Immortal level spirit vein was immediately discovered. There were also a few experienced cultivators who discovered the quality of the spirit vein with just a little inspection. This spirit vein was not just a Sky Immortal grade spirit vein, but a peak Sky Immortal grade spirit vein. It was only a step away from the Golden Immortal grade. The reason why Wild Goose Mountain was not taken seriously was because there were only a few Earth Immortal grade spirit veins here, and there were only mid-level Earth Immortal grade spirit veins. The big sect didn't care about them at all. Therefore, there were only a few small and medium-sized sect here, and the strongest cultivator was only a 5th or 6th level Earth Immortal. Now that a peak Sky Immortal grade spirit vein had suddenly appeared, how could they not go crazy? A few immediately rushed forward and wanted to take it for themselves, but the smarter ones left immediately. Previously, the White Tiger Hall, Formless Sect, and a few other forces brought people to the Gourd Cave, so they couldn't hide it from everyone. It was just that ordinary people couldn't afford to offend these guys, so they didn't follow them. Now that all the people from those forces had disappeared without a trace, there was a peak sky immortal grade spirit vein in the gourd cave. It would be strange if there wasn't a ghost involved. Soon, the news spread across the entire Yinluo mountain along with the people who left and then to a wider area. In the end, even some of the major sects knew about the sudden discovery of a peak heaven immortal grade spirit vein in Yinluo mountain. When the higher-ups of the 5 Big Dao Sects sect heard the news, their first reaction was not to find out what had happened in Wild Goose Mountain, but to think of some other areas that Yang Chun had mentioned when he was looking for territory. The current location of Chunyang Palace, Sunset Cliff, Linyang River, and Parting Hatred Sea, in addition to the Chessboard Mountain, Ice Cliff, Demon Buster Valley, and Wild Goose Mountain that Yang Chun had mentioned, these remote areas that no one had paid attention to before. Could it be that there was really something fishy about them? The spirit vein that had already been discovered would definitely be snatched by other sect. The 5 big sects were far away from Wild Goose Mountain, and there would be no good excuse for them to snatch it. However, this didn't prevent them from taking action immediately and taking Chessboard Mountain, Ice Cliff, and Demon Buster Valley for themselves first. It didn't matter if there were any good things in them first. They would take their time to look for them after they had become their own territory. At that time, the 4 Heaven Immortal experts of the 4 big sects had directly negotiated with Yang Chun. Now, the sects would be the first to act. As long as they could occupy the territory first, the other sects would definitely not take action out of respect or fear of the 4 big sects' strength. Then, the benefits would be in the hands of the sects first. Another important thing was that the sects would immediately send their own disciples to contact Yang Chun and see if they could get more information about these territories from Yang Chun. Of course, the most suitable disciples were Yang Chun's wives and concubines. As a family, Yang Chun would have to consider giving them some face, right? As for how Yang Chun knew these secrets, it wasn't important. From the fact that Yang Chun could refine questioning inner heart pills and spirit congealing pills in the mortal world, it was obvious that he had inherited some spiritual domains heritage. Now, everyone wanted to know what else he knew. Chapter 16:21. Compared with the craziness of the ordinary sect and cultivators when they learned that there was a spirit vein of very immortal level, the top management of the 5 sects were very calm. Sunset Rock, Linyangchuan, and Parting Hatred Sea had been given to Chunyang Palace, and the 5 sect announced it. Naturally, they could not deny it. However, even so, as long as they could find better spirit veins in the remaining places, they would give them to Chunyang Palace as the price of consultation. Shi Shanshan, Sun Qingxue, Shi Wushuang, and the Murong sisters were all sent by the top management of the sect. They had only one task, which was to try their best to build a good relationship with Chunyang Palace. Yang Chun and they were already a family, and it was not too much to be close to them. Everyone also understood that as long as they were good to Chunyang Palace, they could win the favor of Yang Chun. Many people in the Xintian sect, even if they hated Yang Chun, had to grit their teeth and let go of their hatred at this moment. Fortunately, they already knew that their disciple, Tout Junkie, had already gone to Yang Chen's side, so they were a little relieved. Even if they could not occupy the majority in the battle for the new territory, they could not fall behind. In fact, not only the Dao sect, but also the Devil sect and the Demon Clan's Big Sect were secretly exploring Yang Chen's secrets. There was no impenetrable wall in the world. At first, the 4 sect did not take it seriously when Yang Chun was fighting for the territory of Chunyang Palace. Later, when they admitted that Chunyang Palace had obtained Sunset Rock and Parting Hatred Sea in Linyangchuan, they made it even more widely known. Now that Yinluo Mountain, where Yang Chun had once fought for, found a spirit vein of the peak of fairy immortal level, it immediately attracted the attention of several big sect. Everyone remained calm, but they were carefully exploring the possible inheritance of Yang Chun. Yang Chun could say these places casually, which meant that they were not important enough for Yang Chun to keep secret. According to ordinary people's way of thinking, or their own way of thinking, good things definitely shouldn't be taken out at the beginning. Now everyone was guessing what else Yang Chun knew. When Yang Chun rushed back to Chunyang Palace, Shi Shanshan, Sun Qingxue, Shi Wushuang, and the Murong sisters also rushed over. The reunion of husband and wife was naturally a joyous occasion. On the way, Yang Chen had told Old Bug a lot of things. For now, what Yang Chen wanted Old Bug to do was not complicated. He just wanted him to guard Chunyang Palace. However, with Elder Bug's current condition, it was safer for him to follow Yang Chen. Otherwise, the entire Chunyang Palace might be destroyed by Elder Bug one day. After greeting the sect master and the elders, Yang Chen concealed the things about Elder Bug. Some things were not suitable for the palace master and the sect master to be worried about, so it was better to hide it first. If possible, try to let the sect occupy the mountains in front of the Sunset Rock. Yang Chen said to the girls after they had a good time. This time, Yang Chen did not expect that there would be a spirit vein of fairy immortal level in Gourd Valley. This was different from the spirit vein of Yinluo Mountain in his memory. However, this did not prevent the several places he mentioned before from becoming the focus of the big sect. With the appearance of the girls, Yang Chen did not need to ask what the sect behind them was thinking. Yang Chen did not reject the ideas of the big sect. For the time being, Chunyang Palace was still very weak, so it still needed the protection of more powerful forces. The four major sect was obviously a suitable shield. Giving them benefits and letting them stand in front of Chunyang Palace was in line with the interests of Chunyang Palace. Yang Chen would not be blind, and he would not put on a strong appearance when his own sect was not strong. No one would pay attention to him, which would only make the pure Yang Palace excluded. If he wanted Chunyang Palace to better integrate into the spiritual world, he needed a more appropriate way. Obviously, the way of sharing benefits in a mortal world was the most appropriate. In fact, there were not many spirit veins in the Sunset Rock, but the terrain was very suitable. In the future, it would become a fortress-like stronghold for the cultivators. The real spirit veins were in the mountains in front of the Sunset Rock. The spirit veins were very close to the Sunset Rock and became the spiritual power source of the Sunset Rock. In addition to the spirit veins, there were a lot of mineral deposits in the mountains, but they were buried very deep, and there was volcanic magma below, so it was very difficult to mine them. However, there was a very precious purple flame magic iron in the volcanic magma. Even a sect like the Xintian sect would drool over it. The range of the mountains was not small, and it would also be an important area in the future. The major sect occupied and operated in advance, and they could also prepare for the difficulties in the future. The more prepared the major sect was, the safer the Chunyang Palace in the rear would be. Chunyang Palace could not take these places, and Yang Chen could not take them either. In this case, why not take them out to earn a favor for Chunyang Palace? What's more, even if the 5 major sects jointly occupied this place, there would always be times when the spoils were unevenly distributed. In particular, the Xintian sect still had a grudge against them in the mortal world. At that time, this would be a point of conflict. The women did not expect their husband to be so straightforward. They all looked at Yang Chen in surprise and did not seem to know what to say. "You are all my people. I can't let you be in a dilemma between the sect and my husband," Yang Chen explained with a smile. "Anyway, I have to give it away. Of course, it is the most appropriate to give it to you." Listening to Yang Chen's explanation with a smile, the women felt a burst of warmth in their hearts. Yang Chen had indeed considered their feelings, and he took care of them so thoroughly that they could not help but feel a faint sense of happiness. However, it is not without any requirements, Yang Chen said immediately, and the women also pricked up their ears to listen. In the place closest to the Sunset Rock in Linyang River, a large market needs to be built. Moreover, it is a market that does not prohibit demons and demons. Yang Chen was not polite to his wives and concubines. Anyway, they were just messengers, and the specific conditions were still set by the major sect. The 5 major sects must help build this market, provide money, manpower, and send the sect's businesses. There is no need to hide it. This is good for Chunyang Palace. This is the condition. It was just a way to build a large market. This was simply not a condition. There was no need for the higher-ups of the major sect to decide, and the women themselves could agree. However, the women were also very clear about their identities, so they did not overstep their authority to make a decision. This matter was related to their husband, and they could not give others a handle. The women came and left in a hurry. Even Tao Junkie, who had been living here before, was pushed back to the sect by Yang Chun. Some things could not be avoided from a Xintian sect. Not to mention that Yang Chun had plans specifically for the Xintian sect. At this time, the Xintian sect was not as peaceful as it seemed on the surface. The reason why they had been holding back was that they did not seem to pursue the fact that the Taishamen were exterminated. In fact, they were waiting for the news from the mortal world to come. However, until now, there had been no message from the mortal world. Everyone knew that something must have happened in the mortal world. Chapter 16:22. The higher-ups of the Black Heaven sect in the immortal world were all puzzled. The current Jade Emperor was also anxious. It had been more than 10 years since the consciousness of the great, overarching golden immortal descended to the mortal world. With that immortal body and the ability of the consciousness of the great, overarching golden immortal, it should have sent a master to ascend within a year or two after descending to the mortal world. Even if he included the time for the first spiritual realm ascension lesson, a letter should have arrived by now. However, even when the Black Heaven sect sent a supreme golden immortal expert to sneak into the town to search for the injured people, they did not receive any information. The expert who was looking for people didn't believe it. He even specifically found 4 or 5 juniors who had ascended in the past 1 or 2 years and carefully questioned them. From their mouths, he learned that there hadn't been a terrifyingly powerful expert in the mortal world recently. Everything was very normal. No matter how difficult it was and how he couldn't do anything immediately, it was impossible for him to not receive any news at all, right? But that Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal seemed to have disappeared into thin air, vanishing without a trace. No one had ever seen or heard of him. He had vanished without a trace. How is this possible? That was the consciousness of a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal that the immortal world Xintian sect paid a huge price to send to the lower realm. How could there be a problem? All the processes were very normal. In the past, he had even paid a greater price to send an immortal body to the lower realm. This time, he only sent the consciousness of a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal. How could there be a problem? How many times did he recall the teleportation process? Everyone involved said that there was no problem, so the problem must be in the mortal world. However, what kind of danger could there be in the mortal world that could make a perfected golden immortal disappear? Which sect has such a master? Even if there were experts who could accurately pinpoint the location of the immortal body. After waiting for so long for no news, coupled with the verification of the Grand Supreme Golden Immortal Expert, it actually explained many problems. In the end, the higher-ups of the profound heaven sect in the spirit realm had no choice but to come to a conclusion that they were extremely unwilling to accept. The immortal realm's plan had completely failed. This was a big problem. The failure of this arrangement meant that the mysterious heaven sect's plan to rebuild the Taishamen in the mortal world was completely ruined. No matter how powerful the forces of the immortal world were, the profound heaven sect could not afford to pay such a price to send the consciousness of another expert into the mortal world. It wasn't that he couldn't afford to pay the price of sending his consciousness down to the mortal world, but that he couldn't send his immortal body down to the mortal world. This time, there was a problem. Since it seemed normal for the consciousness to descend into the mortal world, then the problem was most likely with the immortal body. The previous immortal body was sent down by the ancestor of the mysterious heaven sect with the help of Old Lord Taishang. Now, Old Lord Taishang had been sent into the immortal slaying platform that he had personally refined. Even if the mysterious heaven sect was willing to pay a high price, who else would have the means to send another celestial body to the lower realm? The failure of the entire setup also revealed another terrifying outcome. The mysterious heaven sect would no longer be able to obtain the support of a steady stream of disciples from the mortal world. From now on, the once powerful mysterious heaven sect would become water without a source, a tree without roots. Once all the disciples ascended, the mysterious heaven sect would no longer exist in the spiritual realm. Although the mysterious heaven sect could use another method to obtain suitable disciples from the natives of the spiritual realm, that method wasn't a good thing for the experts of the Mysterious Heaven sect. Every time they created a native disciple, it meant that a Heaven Immortal expert would have to waste at least 2,000 years of time. This price might not be something that the experts of the Mysterious Heaven sect could afford. Not to mention anything else, just their lifespan alone might not be able to support it. How long could a Heaven Immortal expert have? After spending 2,000 years, even if they could ascend to the immortal world in the future, would they be able to reach the peak of their cultivation? The originally foolproof arrangement had an accident. For a moment, even the sect master of the Mysterious Heaven sect was a little flustered. All these years, the higher-ups of the Mysterious Heaven sect had been waiting for this news to boost their morale, but they were disappointed. In any case, the Mysterious Heaven sect couldn't just sit and wait for death. Even if the sect was destined to be destroyed, the Mysterious Heaven sect had to drag the other sect down with them before that. For now, the profound Heaven sect in the spiritual world could only temporarily accept the disciples of the sects that had been controlled by the greatest Heaven sect before in the mortal world. Unfortunately, when the Taishamen were destroyed, the sect that had a close relationship with the Taishamen didn't escape, and most of them were wiped out. The few that remained were some insignificant small sects that usually didn't have the opportunity to get too close to them. In any case, mosquitoes were still meat. Although these sects were small, they could still provide a few disciples who ascended normally. They would have to wait and see if there was an opportunity in the future to give them some pointers so that their forces in the mortal realm would become stronger. Of course, this kind of possible future pointers would likely mean that the Mysterious Heaven sect would have to pay a terrifying price. If the news that Tao Junkie brought back was in the past, the higher-ups of the Mysterious Heaven sect would be very happy. Anyone would be happy to get a new piece of fertile land. However, now, the higher-ups weren't as excited as they had imagined. Instead, after Tao Junkie left, there were some different voices. Our Mysterious Heaven sect has been swallowing our anger all these years and not fighting with those sects for a while, but some people seem to think that our forbearance is easy to bully. A higher-up said with a cold face, not to mention others. Even a junior who has just ascended for a few years dares to shit on our Mysterious Heaven sect. Tao Junkie had just left, and there were already such words here. There was no need to ask carefully to know that it was definitely directed at Tao Junkie's husband, Yang Chun. He had just ascended and immediately killed the genius disciple of the Mysterious Heaven sect, young Master Isian. Then, the disciple responsible for tracking Tao Junkie disappeared for no reason. This debt was probably on Yang Chen's head. Tao Junkie was their disciple, and she was ordered to ease the relationship with Yang Chun in the mortal realm. This kind of disciple who sacrificed herself for the sake of the sect shouldn't be blamed. Therefore, the higher-ups of the Mysterious Heaven sect didn't have any opinions about Tao Junkie because of Yang Chun. However, this didn't mean that they would let Yang Chun go. In the past, they had been hiding their strength and biding their time. Before the matters in the mortal world were resolved, they knew that the arrangements in the mortal world had been aborted. If they continued to endure, others would really think that the Mysterious Heaven sect had become a soft persimmon that could be pinched by anyone. We want the site. We will also build a market for them, but Yang Chun, this guy must die. The higher-up who had just spoken seemed to have a deep hatred for Yang Chun. There was a murderous intent in his voice. We want the prolonging life pill, and we also want the pill recipe. If he is tactful, we will reward him with an intact corpse. If he is not tactful, we will let him die without a corpse.